A waitress sees what no one else can, a fatal flaw hidden in a $150 million deal. In 3 seconds, she must choose, stay silent and survive, or speak up and risk everything. What happens next will prove that sometimes the people we overlook are the ones who save us all. If you want to see how one whispered warning changed 2 lives forever, stick with me until the end. And hey, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The Gilded Compass didn't just serve food, it served power. Tucked between the steel towers of downtown, behind a doorway most people walked past without noticing, the restaurant existed for one purpose: to host the kind of conversations that shaped industries. No menus with prices, no walk-ins, just dark wood, soft lighting, and the quiet hum of wealth-changing hands over plates that cost more than most people's car payments. Clara Hayes had worked there for 8 months, and she still felt like an imposter every time she pushed through the staff entrance. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not in this uniform, not carrying trays, not smiling politely while men in suits ignored her existence. 5 years ago, she'd been someone else entirely. Dr. Clara Hayes, a name that appeared on research papers and conference panels. Someone with a future that looked nothing like this. But life had other plans. Tonight, she smoothed down her black apron and checked her reflection in the scratched mirror of the staff bathroom. Her dark hair was pulled back tight, not a strand out of place. Her shirt was pressed, her shoes polished. She'd learned that invisibility was an art form, and she'd gotten very good at it. "Clara, you're on the Pinnacle Room," Danny, the floor manager, announced as she stepped into the kitchen's chaos. He didn't look up from his tablet. "VIP service, high stakes." Her stomach dropped. The Pinnacle Room was the restaurant's crown jewel, a private dining space on the 3rd floor where deals worth more than small countries' GDPs got finalized. She'd only worked it twice before, both times as backup. The tips could be incredible, but the pressure was suffocating. "Who's the party?" she asked. "Adrian Vale." Danny finally glanced at her, his expression serious. "So don't mess this up. The man doesn't tolerate mistakes." Clara knew the name. Everyone did. Adrian Vale was 32 years old and already legendary, a self-made billionaire who'd built Vale Energy from nothing into a renewable power giant. The business magazines loved him. The gossip sites loved him more. Young, brilliant, ruthless in negotiations, and raising a 6-year-old son alone after his wife died in a car accident 3 years ago. She'd seen his face on magazine covers in the break room. Sharp features, dark eyes that seemed to calculate the worth of everything they looked at, a jaw that suggested he didn't smile often. The kind of man who made decisions that affected thousands of lives before most people finished their morning coffee. "I've got it," Clara said, forcing confidence into her voice. Danny studied her for a moment. "You sure? I can put Melissa on it." "I'm sure." He nodded and turned away, already focused on the next crisis. Clara grabbed her serving pad and headed for the service elevator, her heart beating faster than it should. The Pinnacle Room occupied the entire 3rd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city's glittering skyline, but thick curtains could be drawn for privacy. Tonight, they were closed. The room's centerpiece was a massive table made from a single piece of reclaimed oak, surrounded by leather chairs that probably cost more than her monthly rent. When Clara entered, the table was already set with precision that bordered on obsessive. Crystal glasses caught the candlelight. Silverware gleamed. Everything was exactly where it needed to be. She checked the settings 3 times, adjusted a fork that didn't need adjusting, and tried to calm the nervous energy thrumming through her chest. The guests began arriving at 7 sharp. First came the executives, 3 men in suits that fit too well to be off the rack, carrying leather portfolios and the casual confidence of people who never worried about money. They barely acknowledged her as they took their seats, already deep in conversation about market projections and regulatory frameworks. Then Adrian Vale walked in, and the energy in the room shifted. He was taller than she'd expected, maybe 6'2", moving with the kind of controlled grace that came from someone always aware of being watched. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, but there was something about the way he wore it, like he was just barely tolerating the formality. His dark hair was slightly too long for a corporate setting, touching his collar. His eyes swept the room in one quick assessment before settling on his guests. "Gentlemen," he said, and his voice carried weight without being loud. "Let's make history." Clara stood near the wall, hands clasped behind her back, trying to blend into the wallpaper. She'd learned that the wealthier the guests, the less they noticed the staff. You became part of the furniture, as long as you never made noise, never interrupted, never reminded them you were human. The dinner began. She moved through her routine on autopilot. Water glasses filled before they were empty, wine poured at exactly the right moment, plates cleared between courses with silent efficiency. The men talked business in a language of acronyms and projections. Something about lithium-ion battery technology, distribution networks, manufacturing partnerships. Clara caught fragments as she worked. Revolutionary energy density. Production scale by Q3 next year. Triple the range of current market leaders. Her hand stayed steady as she set down the main course, but something in her chest tightened. Battery chemistry. They were talking about battery chemistry. Her field. Or what used to be her field, back when she had a field. Adrian Vale sat at the head of the table, listening more than talking, his fingers steepled in front of his face. Occasionally he'd ask a question, sharp, precise, cutting through the corporate speak to the real issue underneath. The other men deferred to him, even the ones twice his age. "The formula is solid," one of the executives was saying. A silver-haired man named Robert something, VP of something. "We've tested it extensively. The energy density is unprecedented." "Show me," Adrian said. Robert pulled out a tablet and tapped a few times. A small projector built into the table hummed to life, casting a screen onto the wall opposite the windows. Chemical formulas appeared, complex chains of elements and bonds that would look like gibberish to most people. Clara was refilling a water glass when she saw it. Her hand froze mid-pour. No. That wasn't right. She blinked, looked again, certain she'd misread. But the formula was right there, projected large enough for everyone to see, and the error was glaring. At least it should have been glaring. To anyone who understood the chemistry, it was obvious. The lithium cathode composition was wrong. Not wildly wrong, just wrong enough. A small deviation in the manganese ratio, probably a transcription error or a miscommunication somewhere in the development process. The kind of mistake that wouldn't show up in basic testing, but would become catastrophic under real-world stress conditions. Thermal runaway. Battery fires. The kind of failures that made headlines and ended careers. Clara finished pouring the water with shaking hands and stepped back to her position against the wall. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She had to be wrong. These were experts, professionals with entire teams of researchers and millions of dollars in testing facilities. They wouldn't miss something so fundamental. She was a waitress who hadn't worked in a lab in 5 years. Her knowledge was outdated. She was tired, probably seeing patterns that weren't there. But she wasn't wrong. She knew she wasn't wrong. "The projected lifespan?" Adrian asked, studying the screen. 10 years minimum under normal use conditions, Robert said smoothly. "We're confident in the stability." "You shouldn't be," Clara thought, and had to bite the inside of her cheek to keep from saying it out loud. "And you've stress-tested the thermal management?" Adrian's eyes hadn't left the screen. "Extensively. The formula is sound." It wasn't sound. It was dangerous. Clara's mind raced through the chemistry, double-checking her analysis. The ratio would cause uneven lithium plating during charge cycles. Over time, dendrites would form, creating internal short circuits. Under high-stress conditions, extreme temperatures, rapid charging, physical impact, the battery could enter thermal runaway. Fires, explosions. People could die. She looked around the room. No one else had noticed. They were all nodding, convinced, ready to move forward with a formula that would eventually destroy everything they were trying to build. Adrian Vale picked up a pen from beside his plate. Expensive, probably custom. The kind of pen people used to sign documents worth 9 figures. "The contract," he said to Robert. One of the other executives slid a leather portfolio across the table. Adrian opened it, flipped through pages with practiced speed, his expression neutral. Clara's pulse roared in her ears. She should stay quiet. She should do her job, collect her paycheck, go home to her tiny apartment and the stack of unpaid bills on her kitchen counter. This wasn't her problem. She wasn't part of this world anymore. She'd lost the right to have opinions about battery chemistry when she'd lost everything else. But people would get hurt. Children, maybe. Families. The technology was meant for electric vehicles, which meant everyday people trusting their lives to a flawed formula. And Adrian Vale, whatever else he was, had a 6-year-old son. Would he put his own child in a car powered by batteries that could catch fire? The pen touched paper. Clara's feet moved before her brain caught up. She crossed the space between the wall and the table in 4 quiet steps, her server training keeping her movement smooth and unthreatening. She stopped just behind Adrian's right shoulder, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something subtle and expensive. Her mouth had gone dry. Her hands were trembling. Every instinct screamed at her to step back, retreat to safety, let this moment pass. She leaned down, bringing her lips close to his ear, and whispered 6 words that would change everything. "Sir? That's the wrong formula." Adrian's pen stopped moving. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. The room seemed to hold its breath. Clara could hear her own heartbeat, loud and erratic, drowning out the soft classical music playing from hidden speakers. Then Adrian turned his head slowly, and she found herself looking directly into eyes so dark they were almost black. His expression was perfectly controlled, but she could see the anger simmering underneath, cold, sharp, dangerous. "Excuse me?" His voice was quiet, deadly quiet. Clara's throat closed. She'd made a terrible mistake. She should apologize, back away, disappear before security dragged her out. But the formula was still there on the screen, still wrong, still dangerous. "The battery formula," she managed, barely above a whisper. "The manganese ratio in the cathode composition. It's incorrect." Robert's face had gone red. "What the hell do you think you're—" Adrian held up one hand, silencing him without looking away from Clara. "You're a waitress." It wasn't a question. It was a fact being laid out for examination. "Yes, sir. And you think you know more about advanced battery chemistry than my vice president of research and development?" Her voice cracked. She swallowed hard and tried again. "I used to work in the field. Before." "Before what?" "Before this." Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly, studying her with an intensity that made her want to shrink back. She could feel the other men at the table staring at her. Robert looked like he wanted to throw her out the window. "This is completely inappropriate," Robert said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. "Adrian, I apologize for this interruption. Our staff is usually—" "What's your name?" Adrian asked Clara, cutting Robert off again. "Clara Hayes." "Clara Hayes." He said it slowly, like he was testing how it sounded. "You're telling me that my team, which includes 3 PhDs and 2 former MIT professors, made a mistake in basic chemistry?" Put like that, it sounded insane. She sounded insane, but she was right. Clara reached into her apron pocket and pulled out her order pad and pen. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped both. She flipped to a clean page, took a breath, and began to write. The formula flowed from her pen like muscle memory. The correct manganese to nickel to cobalt ratio for the cathode composition. The adjusted stoichiometry. The structural formula showing the proper crystalline lattice. She wrote quickly, clearly, years of laboratory notation making her handwriting precise, even as her hands trembled. When she finished, she carefully tore the page from the pad and placed it on the table in front of Adrian. "This is the correct formula," she said quietly. "What you have on the screen will cause dendrite formation during charge cycles. Under stress conditions, you'll get thermal runaway, battery fires. It might take months or years to manifest, but it will happen." The silence that followed was absolute. Adrian picked up the napkin. She'd written on her server's napkin, Clara realized with a strange, detached horror, and studied it. His expression gave nothing away. Robert leaned over to look, his face still flushed with anger. "This is absurd. Adrian, our formula has been tested by—" "Where did you work?" Adrian interrupted, still looking at Clara's handwriting. "Before this." "Meridian Research. I was finishing my doctorate in materials chemistry with a focus on lithium-ion battery technology." "Meridian Research." Adrian finally looked up at her. "They closed their battery division 4 years ago. 5 years ago. They lost their funding after the Johnson Group withdrew their investment. And you went from a doctorate program to waiting tables." It wasn't a question, but Clara answered anyway. "My father got sick, cancer, the medical bills." She stopped, realizing she was explaining her life to a room full of strangers who didn't care. "I had to leave the program. I needed money fast." Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes moving between Clara's face and the napkin in his hand. Then he set down his pen, carefully, deliberately, and turned to Robert. Run the simulation, he said. Robert's expression went from angry to stunned. What? You heard me. Run the thermal stress simulation. Her formula versus ours. Adrian, this is a waste of… Robert! Adrian's voice didn't get louder, but something in it made the older man's mouth snap shut. Run! The simulation! The room had gone from stunned to tense. The other executives exchanged glances. Clara stood frozen, her empty serving pad still in her hands, wondering if she was about to get fired or arrested, or both. Robert's jaw worked silently for a moment before he pulled out his phone. I'll need to access the lab servers. This will take a few minutes. We'll wait, Adrian said. The next 10 minutes were the longest of Clara's life. She retreated to her position against the wall while Robert typed furiously on his tablet, muttering under his breath. The other executives sat in uncomfortable silence, not quite looking at each other. Adrian remained perfectly still, his fingers steepled again, watching Robert work with the patience of someone who'd learned to read people by their nervous tics. Clara wanted to disappear. She wanted to sink through the floor and never come back. What had she been thinking? She'd humiliated herself, insulted a room full of experts, and probably destroyed any chance of keeping her job. All because she couldn't keep her mouth shut about a formula that probably was fine, that she'd probably misread because she was tired and stressed and clinging to a past that was gone. Running the simulation now, Robert announced, his voice clipped. He tapped a final command on his tablet. The projection screen changed, splitting into two side-by-side displays. On the left, original formula. On the right, corrected formula. Both showed a battery cell being subjected to identical stress tests, rapid charging cycles, temperature fluctuations, physical impacts. For the first minute, both simulations looked identical. The batteries charged and discharged normally, their internal temperatures rising and falling within safe parameters. Then, around the 90-second mark, something changed. The left screen, the original formula, showed a small yellow dot appearing inside the battery cell's cathode. Just a tiny irregularity. But Clara knew what it meant. Lithium dendrite formation. The beginning of the end. Adrian leaned forward slightly, his eyes locked on the screen. The simulation continued. More yellow dots appeared on the left display, spreading like an infection through the cathode material. The right display, Clara's corrected formula, remained clean, its internal structure stable. At the 2-minute mark, the left screen flashed red. Thermal runaway detected, the display warned. The simulated battery's temperature spiked from 40 degrees Celsius to over 300 degrees Celsius in less than 5 seconds. The cell's internal structure collapsed. A small animation showed flames erupting from the battery casing. Catastrophic failure, the screen declared. The right display, meanwhile, showed a perfectly functioning battery maintaining stable chemistry through the entire stress test. Robert's face had gone from red to white. Nobody spoke. Adrian sat back in his chair slowly, his expression unreadable. He looked at the screen for a long moment, then down at the napkin on the table, then finally back at Robert. Would you like to tell me, Adrian said very quietly, how a waitress found a fatal flaw that your entire department missed? Robert opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. There must be… The testing protocols we used were inadequate, clearly. Adrian's voice was still quiet, but there was steel underneath. This formula would have killed people, Robert. Do you understand that? We were 60 seconds away from signing a deal based on technology that would have caused battery fires in consumer vehicles, my vehicles, with my name on them. We can review the testing procedures, identify where the oversight. Oversight? Adrian's composure finally cracked, just slightly. This wasn't an oversight, this was negligence. We're building batteries that are going to go into cars, into homes, into schools. One of those batteries catches fire and kills a child, and it's not just a lawsuit, it's blood on our hands. Clara's chest felt tight. She'd been right to speak up. The knowledge should have been vindicating, but instead she just felt sick. Adrian stood abruptly, and everyone else at the table jumped slightly. He picked up the napkin with Clara's formula and folded it carefully, tucking it into his jacket pocket. Gentlemen, he said to the other executives, we'll be postponing this evening's agreement. My team will be conducting a comprehensive review of all battery specifications before we proceed. You'll hear from my office within the week. It was clearly a dismissal. The executives gathered their portfolios and tablets with the practiced speed of people who knew better than to argue. Robert looked like he wanted to say something, but one glance at Adrian's face made him think better of it. Within 2 minutes, the room had emptied except for Adrian and Clara. The silence that followed felt different from before, heavier. Adrian turned to face her fully for the first time. Up close, Clara could see faint shadows under his eyes, the kind that came from too many late nights and too much responsibility. He couldn't have been much older than her, but he looked like he'd lived several lifetimes already. "How long?" he asked. "Sir? How long did it take you to spot the error?" Clara thought back. 3 seconds, maybe. As soon as I saw the full formula. 3 seconds. Something that might have been a smile flickered across his face, there and gone. "My 30-person research team spent 6 months developing that formula. You found the flaw in 3 seconds while serving water." I knew the chemistry. It used to be my whole life." Adrian studied her for another long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call, turning slightly away. "Marcus, I need a full background check. Name is Clara Hayes, former researcher at Meridian. I want everything. Employment history, publications, credentials, financials, everything. I need it tonight." He paused, listening. "I don't care what time it is. Tonight." He ended the call and turned back to Clara. "What happened to your father?" The question caught her off guard. "He died 2 years ago. The cancer came back after the first round of treatment. We fought it for 3 years, but I'm sorry." The words sounded genuine, which somehow made them harder to hear. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. "The medical bills," Adrian continued. "They destroyed your finances." "Yes." "How much?" "I'm sorry?" "How much debt are you carrying? From the treatment, the aftermath?" Clara's face burned. "I don't think that's 300,000? 4?" She swallowed hard. "Around 350, plus interest." Adrian's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Understanding, maybe, or calculation. "You saved my company tonight," he said quietly. "Do you understand that? If we'd signed that deal, if we'd gone into production with that formula, it would have been the end of everything I've built. Lawsuits, recalls, criminal investigations. My son would have grown up with a father's name destroyed by the biggest product failure in automotive history. I couldn't let it happen. Not if I knew. Most people would have stayed quiet. I'm not most people, I guess." "No." Adrian's gaze was intense. "You're not." He pulled out his wallet, sleek black leather, probably worth more than her entire outfit, and extracted a business card. He handed it to her, and she took it automatically. "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. My office, Vale Tower, 42nd floor. Don't be late." Clara stared at the card, her mind blank. "I don't understand." "You will." Adrian grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair and headed for the door. He paused at the threshold, looking back. "And Clara, don't mention tonight to anyone. Not the other staff, not your friends, nobody. Understood?" She nodded, still holding the card like it might explode. Adrian left without another word. Clara stood alone in the pinnacle room, surrounded by abandoned plates and half-empty wine glasses, holding a business card that felt like a bomb in her hands. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. A text from Danny. "Everything okay up there? Vale's party just left. Did something happen?" She should go downstairs, finish her shift, go home. But her legs felt weak, and the room seemed to tilt slightly, the adrenaline finally catching up with her. She'd just corrected a Billionaire's battery formula on a napkin. She'd just potentially saved lives. She'd just done something impossibly stupid or impossibly brave, and she had no idea which. The business card in her hand was thick, expensive stock. Embossed lettering, Adrian Vale, founder and CEO, Vale Energy. And on the back, handwritten in decisive script, "You're better than this." Clara stared at those 4 words until her vision blurred. She was a waitress with a doctorate she'd never finished, drowning in debt from medical bills for a father who'd died anyway, living in a 4th-floor walk-up that smelled like someone else's cooking. She worked double shifts and avoided phone calls from debt collectors and lay awake at night doing chemistry problems in her head because it was the only thing that made her feel like herself anymore. Was she better than this? She didn't know. But tomorrow at 9 a.m., she was apparently going to find out. Clara carefully folded the business card and tucked it into her pocket, next to her order pad and the pen she'd used to write a formula worth $150 million. Then she went back to work, clearing plates and refilling water glasses for the rest of her shift, invisible once again. But not for much longer. Clara didn't sleep that night. She sat on her apartment's fire escape until 3 in the morning, watching the city lights blur through exhaustion and residual adrenaline, turning Adrian Vale's business card over and over in her hands. The metal grating dug into her legs through her jeans, but the discomfort felt grounding, real, a counterpoint to the surreal quality of everything that had happened. "You're better than this." 4 words that had been living in her chest for hours now, expanding with every breath until they felt like they might crack her ribs. Around 4, she gave up on sleep entirely and made coffee she didn't need. Her hand still shook slightly as she poured, remnants of the nervous energy that had been coursing through her system since the moment she'd opened her mouth in that dining room. The coffee tasted like burnt metal, but she drank it anyway, standing at her kitchen sink and staring at nothing. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of her neighbor's air conditioner and the distant wail of a siren. 1 bedroom, peeling linoleum, a window that didn't quite close all the way. She'd lived here for 3 years, and it still didn't feel like home. More like a place she was waiting to leave, except she had nowhere else to go. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark window over the sink. Hollow eyes, hair still pulled back in the tight bun she wore for work, the outline of her server's uniform hanging on the back of the bathroom door like a ghost. Who was she kidding? She couldn't walk into Vale Tower tomorrow. She couldn't sit across from Adrian Vale and pretend she belonged in his world. That world was gone. She'd mourned it, buried it alongside her father, accepted that the girl who'd presented papers at conferences and dreamed about revolutionizing energy storage was dead. Except she'd spotted that formula error in 3 seconds. Except her hands still remembered how to write chemical equations like other people remembered their own names. Except Adrian Vale had looked at her like she was something other than invisible. At 6:30, Clara showered and stood in front of her closet in a towel, staring at clothes that suddenly seemed impossible. What did you wear to meet a billionaire who'd seen you serving water? Her work uniform was obviously out. The jeans and t-shirts she lived in felt wrong. She had exactly 1 professional outfit left from her old life, a gray pencil skirt and white blouse that didn't quite fit anymore, 5 years of waitressing having changed her body in small ways. She put it on anyway, added the blazer that was slightly too big, looked at herself in the mirror and saw someone playing dress-up. This was a mistake. But she got on the subway at 7:15, riding downtown while the city woke up around her. Construction workers heading to job sites, nurses finishing night shifts, the early corporate crowd already checking their phones. Clara stood pressed against the door, clutching her worn purse, and tried not to throw up. Vale Tower was impossible to miss. 60 stories of glass and steel, reflecting the morning sun like a blade. The lobby was all marble and chrome, with a security desk that looked more sophisticated than her entire apartment. Clara walked through the revolving door at 8:40, her heels clicking too loudly on the polished floor. The security guard looked up as she approached. Young guy, built like he'd played college football. His name tag read Mitchell. "Good morning," Clara said, and her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I have an appointment with Mr. Vale, 9 o'clock, Clara Hayes." Mitchell checked his computer and Clara watched his expression shift from professional courtesy to something more attentive. Whatever Adrian had put in the system, it meant something. "Ms. Hayes, yes. You'll want the executive elevator bank, far right, 42nd floor. Mr. Vale's assistant will meet you." He handed her a visitor badge on a lanyard, and Clara clipped it to her blazer with numb fingers. The executive elevators were glass, offering a view of the lobby as they rose. She watched the ground drop away and focused on breathing. The 42nd floor opened onto a reception area that could have been photographed for an architecture magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, minimalist furniture in shades of gray and black, abstract art that probably cost more than her debt. A woman sat at a sleek desk, mid-40s, perfectly put together in a way that suggested she woke up looking polished. "Miss Hayes?" The woman stood, extending a hand. "I'm Patricia Chen, Mr. Vale's executive assistant, right on time." Her handshake was firm, professional. Clara tried to match it. "Mr. Vale is finishing a call, but he'll be with you shortly. Can I get you anything? Coffee, tea, water?" "I'm fine, thank you." Patricia gestured to a seating area. Please make yourself comfortable. Clara sat on a leather couch that was probably worth more than her car used to be before she'd sold it to pay medical bills. She folded her hands in her lap and tried not to fidget. Patricia returned to her desk and resumed typing, her fingers flying across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Clara's mind raced through every possible scenario. Maybe this was all some elaborate humiliation. Maybe Adrian was in his office right now, laughing with his executives about the waitress who thought she knew better. Maybe she should just stand up and leave before… Ms. Hayes. Patricia was standing. Mr. Vale will see you now. Clara rose on legs that felt uncertain and followed Patricia down a hallway lined with photographs. She caught glimpses as they walked, Adrian at ribbon cuttings, shaking hands with politicians, accepting awards, and smaller, more personal shots. A little boy with dark hair and Adrian's eyes, grinning at the camera. The same boy sitting on Adrian's shoulders. Adrian and the boy at what looked like a little league game, both wearing matching baseball caps. His son. The 6-year-old everyone knew about, but rarely saw photographed. Patricia stopped at a set of double doors and knocked once before opening them. Ms. Hayes, sir. Adrian's office was massive. The entire wall behind his desk was glass, offering an unobstructed view of the city sprawling below. The space itself was surprisingly understated. Clean lines, dark wood, no obvious displays of wealth beyond the sheer scale and location. A few photographs on a credenza, a kid's drawing pinned to a corkboard near the window, incongruous among the corporate setting. Adrian stood behind his desk, phone to his ear, gesturing for Clara to enter. He was in shirt sleeves, his tie loosened, looking like he'd already been working for hours. His jacket hung on a coat rack near the door. I understand that, Michael, but the timeline is non-negotiable, he was saying into the phone, his voice carrying that same quiet authority Clara remembered from last night. If your team can't deliver the revised specs by Friday, I'll need to explore other options. No, that's not a threat. That's logistics. He listened for a moment, his free hand running through his hair in what looked like a habitual gesture. Good. I'll expect the preliminary data by end of business tomorrow. Thank you. He ended the call and set the phone down, finally giving Clara his full attention. His gaze was just as intense as she remembered, analyzing her in that way that made her feel simultaneously visible and exposed. You came, he said. You told me to. Most people don't do what I tell them just because I tell them. I'm not most people, remember? Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. Sit. Clara took one of the chairs facing his desk. The leather was cool against her back. Adrian remained standing for a moment, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. I had my team pull your background last night, he said finally. Want to know what they found? Her stomach dropped. I can imagine. Can you? Adrian moved around his desk and leaned against it, arms crossed, facing her. Clara Hayes, born in Minneapolis. Full scholarship to Northwestern for chemistry. Graduated top 5%. Entered the doctoral program at Meridian Research on a fellowship. Published 3 papers before your 26th birthday, all of them cited extensively in the field. Your advisor called you the most promising young researcher he'd seen in 15 years. Clara's throat felt tight. Hearing her old life summarized like that, reduced to bullet points, hurt more than she'd expected. Then your father got sick, Adrian continued, his tone neutral. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer. You dropped out of the program to care for him. Burned through your savings in the first year. Took on debt to pay for experimental treatments that didn't work. He died 23 months after diagnosis. You've been working service jobs ever since, trying to stay ahead of the interest on $347,000 in medical debt. He paused, watching her face. The collections agencies have been calling you twice a day for the past 6 months. You've stopped answering. Your credit score is in the low 400s. You live in a building that had 14 code violations last year. You work 50-hour weeks and make just enough to cover rent and minimum payments that barely touch the principal. You're 30 years old and your career in chemistry ended before it really began. Clara sat very still, her hands gripped together in her lap so tightly her knuckles were white. Hearing it all laid out like that, clinical and complete, made it real in a way that living it day by day didn't. Did I miss anything? Adrian asked, not unkindly. No, she managed. That's pretty much it. And yet last night, while serving water to people who didn't see you, you spotted a potentially fatal flaw in a formula that my 30-person research team missed. In 3 seconds. Clara didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Adrian pushed off from the desk and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. Do you know what I pay my VP of Research and Development? I imagine a lot. $450,000 a year plus stock options. Robert's been with me for 5 years. Good credentials, solid experience, conservative approach to innovation. He turned back to face her. Last night he almost destroyed my company, not through malice, through incompetence disguised as expertise. Everyone makes mistakes. Not everyone makes mistakes that kill people. Adrian's voice was hard. That formula would have gone into production. We would have built 50,000 battery units in the first year alone. How many of those do you think would have failed catastrophically? Clara did the math in her head without meaning to. Depending on use conditions and manufacturing variants, of probably 15 to 20% within the first 3 years. 10,000 battery fires, in vehicles, in homes, in schools. Adrian's jaw tightened. I have a 6-year-old son, Clara. Do you think I could live with myself knowing that my company's negligence killed someone's child? The rawness in his voice caught her off guard. She'd expected the calculating billionaire from the business magazines, not this. Robert's gone, by the way, Adrian continued. Fired him at 7 this morning. The 2 senior researchers who signed off on the formula are gone too. I'm gutting the entire battery division and starting over. Clara felt a chill. Because of me? Because of them. You just illuminated the problem. He moved back to his desk, resting his hands on the surface, leaning forward slightly. I'm offering you a job. The words hung in the air between them. Clara stared at him. What? Director of Battery Research and Development. You'd lead the team, oversee all formula development and testing protocols, report directly to me. $400,000 base salary, stock options, full benefits including health insurance that would cover pre-existing conditions. Her mind went blank. For a solid 10 seconds, she couldn't process the words. When they finally registered, they still didn't make sense. You can't be serious. I don't joke about business. I don't have my doctorate. I haven't worked in a lab in 5 years. I'm a waitress. You're a brilliant chemist who got derailed by circumstances. Adrian's gaze didn't waver. I need someone who actually understands the science, who won't sign off on formulas just because they look good on paper. Someone who has the integrity to speak up when they see something wrong, even when it costs them. You don't know me. You met me 12 hours ago. I know you saved my company. I know you risked your job to tell the truth. I know you spotted in 3 seconds what a team of experts missed in 6 months. He straightened. That's enough. Clara's hands were shaking again. She pressed them against her thighs. What if I fail? What if you don't? That's not an answer. It's the only answer that matters. Adrian pulled his chair out and sat down, suddenly looking tired. Look, I'm not going to pretend this is charity. I need what you have. A mind that actually works, eyes that actually see. But you need what I have too. Money, resources, a way out of the hole you're in. This feels wrong, Clara said quietly, like I'm taking advantage of something. Taking advantage? Adrian's laugh was sharp, humorless. You saved me from a $100 million mistake. If anything, I'm the one taking advantage by only offering you $400,000. Clara looked down at her hands, her mind spinning. $400,000. It would clear her debt in less than a year. She could have an apartment with windows that closed. She could stop dodging collection calls. She could go back to the work she'd loved, the work that had made her feel alive. But 5 years was a long time. The field had moved on without her. The skills she'd had might be obsolete. She might walk into that lab and discover she couldn't do it anymore. I'm scared, she admitted, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Adrian's expression softened slightly. Good. People who aren't scared don't take things seriously. He leaned back in his chair. I'm going to tell you something I don't tell most people. When my wife died, I had a 6-month-old son and a company that was barely holding together. I was terrified every single day. Terrified I'd fail him, fail the business, fail everyone who depended on me. That fear didn't go away. I just learned to work through it. Clara met his eyes and saw something she hadn't expected. Vulnerability, carefully controlled but present. What happened to your wife? She asked, then immediately wished she hadn't. I'm sorry, That's none of my business. Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light. His voice was flat, factual. She was coming home from a charity event. I was home with Ethan, our son. I got the call at 11:30 at night. She died before the ambulance arrived. I'm so sorry. Adrian waved the sympathy away, uncomfortable with it. The point is, I understand what it's like to have your life completely derailed, to lose the future you thought you'd have. But you get to choose what happens next. You can stay where you are, or you can take the risk. Clara thought about her apartment, her uniform hanging on the bathroom door, the stack of bills she could never quite get ahead of. She thought about her father, who'd spent his last months telling her she was meant for more than this. She thought about the formula she'd written on a napkin, muscle memory kicking in like she'd never left the lab at all. If I say yes, she said slowly, and it doesn't work out, if I can't do the job, I don't want special treatment. I don't want you keeping me on out of guilt or some sense of obligation. Agreed. If you can't do the job, you're out, same as anyone else. And I want to be clear. I'm not interested in anything other than professional respect. Adrian's eyebrow quirked up. Meaning? Meaning I've seen the gossip magazines. I know your reputation. If this is some kind of... Stop right there. His voice went hard. I have a 6-year-old son who lost his mother. I have a company with 8,000 employees depending on me to make good decisions. I don't have time for office romances or whatever you're implying. This is a job offer. Nothing more, nothing less. Clara felt her face heat. I just wanted to be clear. Crystal clear. Are we done with the disclaimers? She took a breath, let it out. When would I start? Monday. I need new protocols in place before we restart any production timelines. Adrian pulled a folder from his desk drawer and slid it across to her. Employment contract. Take it home, read it, have a lawyer look at it if you want. Sign it and bring it back Monday morning, or don't. Your choice. Clara picked up the folder with hands that had finally stopped shaking. The weight of it felt significant, real. There's one more thing, Adrian said. He opened another drawer and pulled out a check, already filled out. He set it on the desk between them. Signing bonus, $20,000. It's yours whether you take the job or not. Clara stared at the check. $20,000. She could pay off her highest interest debt. She could buy groceries without calculating every item. She could breathe. Why? She whispered. Because you earned it. Because you did the right thing when it would have been easier not to. Because I don't like owing people, and I owe you. Clara reached out slowly and picked up the check. Her name was spelled correctly in Adrian's decisive handwriting. The amount was real. Thank you, she said, and her voice cracked on the words. Adrian stood, signaling the meeting was over. Patricia will handle your HR paperwork if you decide to accept. You'll have an office on 41, a research team, and a budget that should make your head spin. But Clara? She looked up at him. Don't thank me yet. This job is going to be brutal. Long hours, constant pressure, and I don't accept excuses. If you sign that contract, you're committing to excellence. Nothing less. I understand. Do you? Adrian studied her face. You've been invisible for 5 years. You've been surviving instead of living. This job is going to put you in the spotlight. Industry conferences, media interviews, board presentations. Can you handle that? Clara thought about the woman she used to be before grief and debt had worn her down to nothing. That woman had presented research to rooms full of skeptical experts. That woman had defended her work against professors who thought she was too young to know anything. That woman was still in there somewhere, buried under 5 years of exhaustion. I can handle it, she said. Then I'll see you Monday. 8 a.m. Don't be late. Clara stood, tucking the check and folder into her purse. She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. Mr. Vale? Adrian. We're going to be working together. Use my name. Adrian, she said, testing the weight of it. That formula last night, the correct one. I can have a full analysis on your desk by Monday morning. Detailed breakdown of why the original failed, recommendations for testing protocols to prevent similar errors, and 3 alternative compositions for different use cases. Adrian's expression shifted into something that might have been approval. You haven't even accepted the job yet. I know, but people's lives are at stake. The work needs to be done regardless. Monday morning, Adrian said. And Clara? Welcome back. The ride down in the elevator felt different than the ride up. Clara caught her reflection in the glass walls and barely recognized herself. Same clothes, same face, but something fundamental had shifted. She walked out of Vale Tower into morning sunshine that felt brighter than it had an hour ago. The city noise surrounded her, traffic, construction, voices, but it didn't feel overwhelming anymore. It felt like possibility. Her phone buzzed, a text from Danny at the restaurant. "Hey, someone called asking about you this morning. HR-related stuff. Everything okay? You're still on for tonight's shift, right?" Clara looked at the message for a long moment. Then she called him instead of texting back. "Danny, it's Clara. I need to talk to you about my schedule." "What's up? You're not quitting, are you? Because we're already short-staffed and I need to give my 2 weeks' notice." Silence on the other end. Then, "You're serious? I got another job offer. It starts Monday, but I want to finish out professionally." "Wow. Okay. I mean, congratulations, I guess. What kind of job?" Clara looked up at Vale Tower, its glass facade reflecting clouds and sky. "Something in my actual field. Chemistry research. That's great, Clara. Really. You were always too smart for this place anyway." Danny's voice was genuine, if a little wistful. "We'll miss you, though. You're one of the reliable ones. I'll work through the weekend. Train whoever you want to take over the Pinnacle Room. The Pinnacle Room is yours until you leave. You earned it." He paused. "This is about last night, isn't it? Whatever happened with Vale's party?" "Yeah," Clara said. "It is." After she hung up, Clara walked to a coffee shop 3 blocks away and ordered an actual good coffee, not the burnt sludge from her apartment. She sat at a table by the window, spread out the employment contract, and began to read. The terms were better than Adrian had described. 400,000 base plus performance bonuses that could double that. Stock options that would vest over 4 years. Health insurance that covered everything. Relocation assistance if she needed it. 2 weeks paid vacation, though the contract noted that most employees rarely took more than a few days. There was a clause about non-disclosure agreements, another about intellectual property rights, a page of legal jargon about termination conditions and severance packages. At the bottom of the last page, a space for her signature. Clara pulled out a pen, the same pen she'd used to write the formula last night, and held it over the line. Her hand hovered there for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing down. If she signed this, everything changed. No more invisibility, no more hiding behind a uniform. She'd have to be the person she used to be, the one who believed she could change the world through chemistry. That person felt like a stranger now. But maybe that was okay. Maybe she needed to meet herself again, see if they still recognized each other. Clara signed her name in clear, confident strokes. She spent the rest of the day in the public library, pulling up every battery chemistry paper published in the last 5 years, getting herself back up to speed. Her brain hurt from the information overload, but it was a good hurt, the kind that came from actually using her mind instead of just getting through the day. Around 6, she headed back to her apartment. The building looked shabbier than usual, the paint more peeling, the hallway more dingy. In 2 months, she could afford to move. In 6 months, she could afford a place with actual heat that worked. In a year, she could be completely debt-free. The thought was dizzying. Her phone rang as she was unlocking her door. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, assuming it was another collection agency, but something made her pick up. "Ms. Hayes?" A woman's voice, professional and efficient. "Yes?" "This is Patricia Chen, Mr. Vale's assistant. I'm calling to confirm your start date for Monday and to arrange your building access. Do you have a moment?" Clara stepped into her apartment and closed the door behind her. "Yes, I have time." "Excellent. You'll need to come in Friday afternoon for security clearance and to set up your credentials. Does 2 p.m. work?" "That's fine." "Perfect. I'll send you an email with the details. Also, Mr. Vale wanted me to inform you that your office is being prepared. Do you have any specific equipment needs for your workspace?" Clara looked around her tiny apartment at the life she was about to leave behind. A good whiteboard, the bigger the better, and a proper espresso machine. She could almost hear Patricia's smile through the phone. "I'll make a note. Anything else?" "That's all for now." "Welcome aboard, Ms. Hayes. We're looking forward to having you." After Patricia hung up, Clara stood in the middle of her apartment and felt the future settling around her like a new skin. Uncomfortable, unfamiliar, but hers. She pulled out her laptop and opened a blank document. For the next 6 hours, she wrote. The formula analysis she'd promised Adrian. Every detail of why the original composition would fail, backed by equations and stress models and thermodynamic calculations that her brain supplied from memory. Alternative formulas, testing protocols, safety measures. She wrote until her eyes burned and her fingers cramped, and it felt like coming home. At 2 a.m, she finally stopped, saved the document, and fell into bed without bothering to change. Sleep came fast and dreamless, the first peaceful night she'd had in years. When her alarm went off at 7, Clara woke up and didn't feel dread for the first time in 5 years. She felt something else, something that took her a moment to identify. Purpose. She had 2 more shifts at the restaurant, and she'd work them with the same quiet efficiency she always had. But she wasn't invisible anymore. She was Clara Hayes, Director of Battery Research and Development, and she had work to do. Friday afternoon arrived faster than Clara expected, and with it came the crushing realization that she had no idea what she was doing. She stood outside Vale Tower at 1:50, wearing the same gray suit she'd worn to the interview, her printed formula analysis tucked into a folder that was already showing wear at the edges. Around her, people in expensive clothes moved with the casual confidence of belonging. Clara felt like an actress who'd forgotten her lines. The security process took 40 minutes. Photos, fingerprints, background verification, building access cards, parking validation she didn't need because she didn't own a car anymore. Mitchell from the front desk walked her through everything with patient efficiency, and Clara tried not to think about how many ways this could still fall apart. Patricia met her on the 41st floor, which looked different from Adrian's executive suite above, but no less intimidating. More industrial, more functional. Labs visible through glass walls, researchers in white coats moving between equipment that probably cost more than houses. "Your office is this way," Patricia said, leading her down a corridor lined with photographs of battery prototypes and patent certificates. "Mr. Vale had it prepared yesterday. If there's anything you need changed, just let me know." The office was corner-positioned with windows on 2 walls. Not as large as Adrian's, but big enough to feel excessive. A standing desk with dual monitors, the whiteboard she'd requested taking up most of one wall, and yes, an espresso machine that looked like it belonged in an Italian cafe. "The team is waiting in conference room B," Patricia said. "Mr. Vale thought you'd want to meet them before Monday." Clara's stomach flipped. The team, right. 12 researchers, all hand-picked. Most of them worked under Robert, but Mr. Vale assured them their positions were secure pending the restructure. Patricia's expression remained neutral, but Clara caught the implication. They were scared. Their boss had been fired, their project had nearly destroyed the company, and now some waitress was about to walk in and take over. "How many of them know?" Clara asked. "About me. About how I got this job. All of them. Mr. Vale doesn't believe in secrets within the organization. He told them exactly what happened at dinner that night." Great. So they'd hate her before she even opened her mouth. Patricia seemed to read her face. For what it's worth, most of them are relieved. They knew something was wrong with the formula, but couldn't identify what. Robert had a way of shutting down questions. Clara followed Patricia to the conference room, her heels clicking too loudly on the polished floor. Through the glass wall, she could see them. 12 people sitting around a table, some talking quietly, others staring at laptops or phones. A mix of ages, genders, ethnicities, all of them looking various degrees of nervous. "Ready?" Patricia asked. "No." "Yes." Patricia opened the door, and 12 pairs of eyes turned toward Clara. "Everyone, this is Dr. Clara Hayes, your new director. Dr. Hayes, your team." Clara stepped into the room, and the title hit her like a slap. Dr. Hayes. She wasn't a doctor. She'd never finished her doctorate. But before she could correct Patricia, a woman near the front stood up. Mid-30s, dark hair pulled into a ponytail, wearing a lab coat over jeans and a band t-shirt. She extended her hand. "Priya Sharma, Senior Researcher, Electrochemistry Specialization. I've read your papers on lithium-ion cathode optimization. The 2019 work on manganese stabilization was brilliant." Clara shook her hand, caught off guard. "Thank you. That was a long time ago." "Good science doesn't age." Priya's smile seemed genuine. "We're glad you're here. Robert was, let's just say he didn't encourage independent thinking." Others began introducing themselves. James, a quiet guy with thick glasses who specialized in thermal modeling. Michelle, who'd been with Vale Energy since its founding and knew every piece of equipment in the building. David, fresh out of his PhD and looking like he might throw up from stress. On and on, names and faces Clara tried to commit to memory while her brain screamed that she didn't belong here. When the introductions finished, everyone sat back down and looked at her expectantly. Clara remained standing, gripping the back of a chair to keep her hands from shaking. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm terrified right now. A few surprised glances. David looked relieved that someone else had admitted fear. I haven't worked in a lab in 5 years, Clara continued. The last time I did real research, half the techniques you're probably using now didn't exist. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to ask stupid questions, and I'm going to need all of you to tell me when I'm wrong. Priya leaned forward. Robert never wanted to hear when he was wrong. I'm not Robert. Clara let go of the chair and walked to the whiteboard at the front of the room. Someone had left markers in the tray. She picked up a black one. Here's what I know. The formula that almost went into production would have killed people. Not might have. Would have. I saw it in 3 seconds because I knew the chemistry, but any of you could have caught it if you'd been encouraged to actually look. She uncapped the marker and started writing. The original formula appeared on the board, her hand moving with muscle memory. Then, beside it, the corrected version. This is the difference between a functional battery and a catastrophic failure. She circled the manganese ratio. This tiny variation. You all saw the original formula. Why didn't anyone catch it? Silence. Then James spoke up, his voice quiet. Robert said the computer models validated it. We trusted the models. Models are only as good as their parameters. Clara wrote a series of equations showing how the error would propagate through stress testing. If your model doesn't account for dendrite formation kinetics under thermal stress, it won't catch this. Did anyone run those specific tests? Michelle raised her hand tentatively. I suggested it. Robert said it was unnecessary, that we were behind schedule. Behind schedule. Clara set down the marker. Let me be very clear about something. I don't care about schedules. I don't care about impressing investors or meeting production deadlines. I care about one thing, making sure that when someone puts their child in a car powered by our batteries, that child comes home safe. Everything else is secondary. She could see the words landing, people sitting up straighter. We're going to rebuild the testing protocols from the ground up, Clara said. Every formula gets stress tested until we're absolutely certain it's safe. If that takes twice as long, fine. If it costs more, fine. Adrian, Mr. Vale, hired me to make sure this never happens again, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Priya was nodding. What do you need from us? Everything. Your expertise, your questions, your concerns. If something looks wrong, I want to know immediately. If you think I'm making a mistake, say so. We're a team, which means we check each other. Clara looked around the room. I can't do this alone. I need all of you. David spoke up, his voice cracking slightly. What happens if we fail? We won't fail, Clara said. Then, more honestly, but if we do, we fail together. And then we figure out what went wrong and we fix it. That's how science works. The meeting continued for another hour. Clara walked them through her analysis of the failed formula, fielding questions and taking notes when people brought up considerations she hadn't thought of. Slowly, the tension in the room began to ease. These were good people, smart people, who'd been working under someone who didn't trust them. Maybe, just maybe, this could actually work. When everyone finally filed out, Priya lingered behind. Can I ask you something? She said. Of course. Why did you speak up that night? You were just serving food. You could have stayed quiet. Clara thought about it. My father died because of a mistake. A doctor prescribed the wrong dosage of a medication, and by the time anyone caught it, the damage was done. I know what it's like to lose someone because somebody didn't check their work. She met Priya's eyes. I couldn't live with myself if I'd stayed quiet, and someone's father died because of it. Priya nodded slowly. I'm glad you're here. After she left, Clara stood alone in the conference room looking at the equations still on the whiteboard. Her handwriting, her knowledge, her responsibility now. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Conference room now. AV. Clara's heart rate kicked up. She made her way back to the executive floor where Patricia directed her to a smaller conference room. Adrian was inside, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, his tie discarded on the table. He looked like he'd been in meetings all day and was running on coffee and stubbornness. "Close the door," he said. Clara did, and the quiet that followed felt heavy. "How'd it go with the team?" Adrian asked. "Better than expected. They're good people. Scared, but good." "They should be scared. They almost shipped a product that would have destroyed lives." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit. We need to talk about the deal." Clara sat, confused. "I thought the deal was postponed." "It was. Now we're restarting negotiations, but with your formula instead of Robert's disaster." Adrian pulled out a tablet and slid it across to her. "This is the contract revision. The investors want a demonstration of the corrected battery's performance before they commit. We have 3 weeks." 3 weeks? Clara felt the blood drain from her face. "That's not enough time to—" "It has to be. We've already lost momentum. Any longer and the investors will walk and we'll lose the manufacturing partnership we need to scale production." Adrian's voice was firm. "I need you to build a working prototype using your formula. Full stress testing, thermal analysis, the works. Can you do it?" Clara's mind raced through the logistics. Design, fabrication, testing, validation. 3 weeks was insane. "I'd need the full lab, priority access to materials, and my team working overtime." "Done. Whatever you need, you have it. Budget is unlimited." "Adrian, if we rush this—" "We're not rushing. We're working efficiently." He leaned forward. "I wouldn't ask if I didn't think you could do it, but I need to know right now if you're capable of handling this pressure." Clara looked at him, at the intensity in his eyes, the exhaustion around their edges. He was betting everything on her. His company, his reputation, his son's future. The weight of it should have crushed her. Instead, she felt something click into place. "I can do it," she said, "but I need you to trust me. If I say we need more time, we need more time. If I say something isn't safe, it isn't safe. No overruling me because of business pressure. Agreed, this only works if I trust your judgment. And if the prototype fails, then we fail. But we fail with integrity, which is more than we would have had with Robert's formula." Adrian pulled the tablet back. "You start Monday. I want daily updates. Any problems? You come directly to me." Clara stood to leave, then paused. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "That night at the restaurant, you could have ignored me. Most people would have. Why didn't you?" Adrian was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable. 3 years ago, my wife told me she felt dizzy before she drove to that charity event. I told her she was fine, that it was probably just stress. I didn't listen." His jaw tightened. "She wasn't fine. She had an undiagnosed heart arrhythmia. She passed out behind the wheel before the drunk driver even hit her. If I'd listened, if I'd taken her seriously instead of dismissing her concerns, she might still be alive." The raw pain in his voice made Clara's chest ache. "So when you told me something was wrong," Adrian continued, "I listened because I learned the hard way what happens when you ignore someone who's trying to help you." Clara didn't know what to say. There were no words adequate for that kind of loss. "Get some rest this weekend," Adrian said, back to business. "Monday's going to be brutal." Clara left his office with her mind spinning. She'd thought this job was about chemistry, about batteries and formulas and testing protocols. But it was about something bigger. Trust. Responsibility. The weight of knowing that her work would determine whether people lived or died. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. Clara spent Saturday in the library again, reviewing every recent advancement in battery technology. Sunday, she walked through her old neighborhood, the places she'd lived when her father was sick, remembering the person she'd been and saying goodbye to her. Monday morning, she'd arrived at Vale Tower at 6:30, unable to sleep anyway. The labs were quiet, just security personnel and a few early researchers. Clara made espresso in her office and stared at the empty whiteboard, trying to organize her thoughts. At 7, Priya appeared in her doorway, holding 2 bagels and looking equally sleepless. "Figured you'd be here early," Priya said, handing her a bagel. "Want to see the fabrication lab before the chaos starts?" They spent the next hour walking through equipment, discussing capabilities and limitations. Priya had worked at Vale for 3 years and knew every machine intimately. She showed Clara the electron microscope, the thermal chambers, the electrochemical testing stations that could simulate years of use in days. "This is incredible," Clara said, running her hand along a spectrometer. "We had nothing like this at Meridian. Robert barely used half of it. He relied too much on computer models, not enough on physical testing. Priya pulled up a stool. What's your plan for the prototype? Clara had been thinking about nothing else all weekend. We need to validate the formula first, make sure my math was correct. Then small-scale cells, testing each component individually before integration. Only after we're certain each piece works do we build the full prototype. That's methodical. Robert would have gone straight to the prototype. Robert almost killed people. By 8, the rest of the team had arrived, and Clara gathered them in the lab. She'd spent the early morning writing their plan on the whiteboard in her office, and now she walked them through it. 12 researchers, 3 weeks, 1 chance to get it right. We're splitting into 3 teams, Clara explained. Priya, you're leading cathode development. James, you're on thermal modeling. Michelle, you're overseeing testing protocols. Everyone else, you'll rotate between teams based on where we need support. She could see the surprise on their faces. Robert had apparently operated on a top-down model where he made all decisions. Clara was distributing authority, trusting them to own their work. Questions? She asked. Michelle raised her hand. What about you? Which team are you on? All of them. I'm going to be everywhere, checking everything, making sure we're not missing anything. Clara managed a tired smile. You'll probably get sick of seeing me. Not possible, David said quietly, and a few people laughed. The work began. Clara had forgotten what it felt like to be completely immersed in chemistry. The first few days were rough. Her hands fumbled with equipment she hadn't used in years. Her brain struggled to recall techniques that used to be second nature. But slowly, muscle memory returned. She found herself moving through the lab with increasing confidence, setting up experiments, analyzing results, catching errors before they became problems. Priya was a revelation. Brilliant and meticulous, she caught things Clara missed and pushed back when she disagreed with approaches. They spent late nights in the lab, arguing about crystal structures and energy densities, and Clara realized she hadn't felt this alive in 5 years. You're smiling, Priya said one night around 11, both of them staring at test results. Clara touched her face, surprised. I am. It's nice. You should do it more often. The days blurred together. Clara arrived before sunrise and left long after dark. She lived on espresso and whatever food people brought to the lab. Her apartment became just a place to shower and change clothes. The work consumed her, but unlike the consuming grief of her father's illness, this felt purposeful. Adrian appeared in the lab on day 5, startling everyone. He rarely came down to the research floors, preferring to let his teams work independently. But there he was, standing in the doorway in a suit that probably cost more than their equipment budget, looking completely out of place among the machines and chemical stations. Dr. Hayes, he said. A word. Clara set down her pipette and followed him to her office. He closed the door behind them and turned to face her. You haven't sent me a single update, he said. Clara's stomach dropped. I'm sorry. I've been so focused on the work, I forgot. I asked for daily updates. It's been 5 days. You're right. That's my fault. I'll send you a full report tonight. Adrian studied her face, and his expression softened slightly. When's the last time you slept? I slept. For how long? Clara couldn't remember. A few hours? Clara. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I can't have my research director burning out in the first week. You're no good to me exhausted. I'm fine. You're not fine. You look like you're about to collapse. He pulled out his phone. I'm having my driver take you home. You're going to sleep for at least 8 hours, and you're not coming back until tomorrow afternoon. I can't leave in the middle of... That's an order, not a suggestion. Clara wanted to argue, but exhaustion hit her like a wave now that someone had acknowledged it. Her bones felt heavy, her eyes burned. What about the work? She asked. Your team is competent. They can manage 12 hours without you. Adrian's voice gentled. You're not alone in this anymore, Clara. You don't have to carry everything yourself. The words hit harder than they should have. For 5 years, she'd been alone, carrying her father's illness, the debt, the grief, the slow erosion of hope. She'd forgotten what it felt like to have support. Okay, she whispered. 8 hours. 12 would be better, but I'll take what I can get. Adrian's driver was waiting downstairs. A quiet man named Thomas, who didn't ask questions, just drove Clara to her apartment building and waited until she was inside. She climbed the 4 flights of stairs, unlocked her door, and fell into bed without even removing her shoes. She slept for 14 hours straight. When she woke, it was Tuesday afternoon, and her phone had 6 missed calls from Priya. Clara's heart hammered as she called back, expecting disaster. "Oh, thank goodness," Priya answered. "I thought you died." "What happened? Is the lab okay?" "The lab's fine. Better than fine, actually. We had a breakthrough on the cathode stability, but Adrian said you were under orders to rest, so I didn't want to bother you." Relief flooded through Clara. "Tell me everything." She spent the next hour on the phone while making actual food, pasta, vegetables, things that weren't vending machine snacks. Priya walked her through their progress, and Clara realized Adrian had been right. The team was competent. They didn't need her hovering over every decision. But she still showered, changed, and headed back to the lab by 4. Adrian was waiting in her office when she arrived. "I said 12 hours minimum," he said without preamble. "I got 14. That's plenty." "Clara, I'm fine. I feel better. And Priya said there was a breakthrough I need to see." Adrian looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression made him back down. "Fine, but you're eating actual meals from now on. I'm having lunch delivered to the lab daily. You don't have to—" "I'm not asking." He stood to leave, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth, the team respects you. Michelle said yesterday that you're the best director they've had." Clara felt warmth spread through her chest. "I'm just trying not to mess up." "You're doing more than that." Adrian's gaze held hers. "You're giving them permission to be excellent. That's rare." After he left, Clara stood in her office for a moment, letting the words settle. Then she grabbed her lab coat and went to see what her team had discovered. The breakthrough was significant. Priya had found a way to stabilize the cathode structure that would extend battery life by nearly 30% beyond Clara's original formula. They spent the evening testing it, running simulations, checking and rechecking the math. "This is incredible," Clara said, staring at the results. "Priya, this could change everything." "It's your formula. I just optimized it." "Don't downplay your work. This is brilliant." The next week passed in a fever of productivity. The team worked like a single organism, each person's expertise complementing the others. They hit roadblocks and worked through them. They found errors and corrected them. They pushed each other and supported each other and slowly, steadily, built something remarkable. On day 16, Clara held the first fully functional prototype battery cell in her hands. It was smaller than a phone, unremarkable to look at, but it represented hundreds of hours of work and the combined expertise of 12 brilliant minds. "Let's test it," she said. They ran every stress test in their arsenal: thermal cycling, rapid charging, physical impact, temperature extremes. The battery performed flawlessly, its internal chemistry stable, its energy output consistent. On day 18, they scaled up to a full battery pack, 48 cells working in concert, the size and capacity needed for an actual vehicle. The fabrication took 2 days of meticulous assembly, everyone working in careful coordination. The final test was scheduled for day 21, 3 weeks exactly from when Clara had started. Adrian came down to the lab that morning, and for once, he wasn't alone. He'd brought someone with him, a small boy with dark hair and enormous brown eyes, wearing a t-shirt with a cartoon dinosaur. "This is Ethan," Adrian said, his hand resting on the boy's shoulder. "He wanted to see what Daddy does all day." Ethan looked up at Clara with open curiosity. "Are you the battery lady?" Clara crouched down to his level, smiling. "I guess I am. Are you the dinosaur expert?" "Triceratops is the best," Ethan announced seriously. "It has 3 horns and a frill for protection." "That's pretty cool. Want to know a secret?" Ethan nodded eagerly. "Batteries are kind of like dinosaurs. They store energy for a long time, and when you need it, they release it all at once, like how a triceratops stores strength in its muscles." "Really? Really?" Ethan seemed to consider this. Then he smiled, and Clara saw Adrian in that smile. The same intensity, the same intelligence. "I like you," Ethan declared. Adrian's expression softened in a way Clara had never seen before. For a moment, he looked less like a billionaire CEO and more like just a dad, watching his son interact with the world. "Ethan, why don't you sit with Patricia while Ms. Hayes finishes her work?" Adrian said gently. "Okay, bye, battery lady." After they left, Priya appeared at Clara's elbow. "That was adorable. He's a sweet kid." Adrian's barely let anyone meet him since his wife died. The fact that he brought Ethan here, Priya trailed off meaningfully. Clara didn't let herself think about what that might mean. She had a test to run. The entire team gathered in the testing chamber. The battery pack sat in the center, connected to monitoring equipment that would track every aspect of its performance. Clara had programmed a stress test that simulated 5 years of heavy use compressed into 6 hours. "Everyone ready?" she asked. 12 heads nodded. Clara initiated the test sequence. For the first hour, everything went perfectly. The battery charged and discharged smoothly, its temperature staying well within safe parameters. The team watched the monitors in tense silence, looking for any sign of the dendrite formation that had doomed Robert's formula. Nothing. The internal structure remained stable. Hour 2, still perfect. Hour 3, flawless. Adrian reappeared during hour 4, Ethan presumably left with Patricia upstairs. He stood at the back of the testing chamber, arms crossed, watching the monitors with the same intensity he brought to everything. Hour 5, and Clara's hands were shaking from tension. They were so close. If the battery could just hold stable for one more hour. At hour 5 and 43 minutes, an alarm sounded. Clara's heart stopped. Everyone's eyes snapped to the monitors. Temperature spike in cell 32. "Talk to me," Clara said, moving to the control station. "What's happening?" James was already pulling up thermal imaging. "Looks like a hot spot. Temperature's elevated but not critical, still within safety margins." "Why is it spiking?" Checking the assembly logs. Michelle pulled up data on her tablet. Cell 32 was assembled during the second batch. Different conditions than the first batch. Slightly higher humidity. Clara's mind raced. Humidity affecting the electrolyte absorption, creating an imperceptible imbalance that wouldn't show up until sustained stress. "It's going to stabilize," she said, more hope than certainty. "The electrolyte distribution should equalize under continued cycling." Adrian stepped closer. "Should or will?" "Will," Clara said firmly, because she had to believe it. They watched cell 32's temperature. It climbed slowly, 38 degrees, 39, 40. Then it held at 41 degrees Celsius, held steady, and slowly, gradually, began to drop. Clara released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The battery completed the full 6-hour test with flying colors. When the final results populated the screen, showing performance metrics that exceeded every target, the lab erupted in cheers. Priya hugged Clara so hard she almost lifted her off the ground. "We did it! We actually did it!" Clara felt tears stinging her eyes and didn't bother to hide them. "We did." Adrian approached quietly, and the team parted to give them space. He looked at Clara, then at the battery pack, then back at Clara. "Is it safe?" he asked. "It's safe," Clara confirmed. "Better than safe. It's ready." Adrian's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. Relief, maybe? Or vindication? "Presentation to the investors is Thursday," he said. 2 days. Can you be ready?" The thought of standing in front of a room full of investors, presenting her work, defending her formula, it should have terrified her. A month ago, it would have. But Clara looked around at her team, at the battery they'd built together, at the data proving beyond doubt that they'd created something safe and revolutionary. "I'll be ready," she said. Adrian nodded once. "Good. Because you're giving the presentation, not me." Clara's eyes widened. "What?" "It's your formula, your work. You should be the one to present it." He pulled out his phone, checking something. "Patricia will set up a practice run tomorrow. Expect the investors to ask hard questions." "Adrian, I haven't done a presentation in 5 years. Then it's time to remember how." He looked at her directly. "I trust you, Clara. Now you need to trust yourself." He left before she could argue further. Priya whistled low. "He's throwing you in the deep end?" "I'm going to drown." "No, you're not. You're going to be brilliant." Priya squeezed her shoulder. "Besides, you've got us. We'll help you prep." That night, the team stayed late, helping Clara build her presentation. They pulled together data visualizations, test results, comparative analyses. David, who apparently had a background in graphic design, made slides that were both informative and visually stunning. By midnight, they had a solid presentation. By 2 a.m., it was polished. By 4 a.m., Clara had practiced it so many times the words felt like muscle memory. She went home at 5, slept for 3 hours, and returned to run through it again. Thursday arrived with cruel speed. The presentation was scheduled for 2 p.m. Clara wore a navy suit Priya had insisted she buy. You can't present in a lab coat, and shoes that pinched her feet. Her hands shook as she set up her laptop in the massive conference room on the executive floor. The investors began filing in at 1:50. 8 people, all older than her, all wearing expressions of polite skepticism. They'd seen Adrian's company nearly fail with a flawed formula. Now they were being asked to trust again. Adrian entered last, taking a seat at the back of the room. Their eyes met briefly, and he gave her the smallest nod. "You've got this." Clara took a breath, pulled up her first slide, and began. 3 weeks ago, this company was 60 seconds away from signing a deal based on battery technology that would have caused catastrophic failures. Today, I'm going to show you why that won't happen again. For the next 45 minutes, Clara walked them through everything. The flaw in the original formula, the corrected chemistry, the rigorous testing protocols, the breakthrough optimizations. She fielded questions with steady confidence, backing up every claim with data. When she showed the stress test results, that 6-hour simulation compressed into a 2-minute video, the room went silent. One investor, a silver-haired woman named Catherine, leaned forward. "This is impressive, but how do we know you won't miss the next error?" Robert had credentials too. Clara met her gaze directly. "Because I built a team that's empowered to question everything, including me. Because we test until we're certain, not until we're on schedule. And because I know what it costs when we get it wrong." She paused. "I lost my father to a medical error. Someone didn't check their work, and he died. I will never let that happen with our batteries." The rawness in her voice seemed to land. Catherine nodded slowly. The questions continued for another 30 minutes, each one sharp and probing. Clara answered them all, her team's work backing her up at every turn. Finally, Adrian stood. "I think we've seen enough. Catherine, gentlemen, if you'll excuse us, my team needs to confer." The investors filed out, and suddenly it was just Clara and Adrian in the massive room. "How do you think I did?" Clara asked, and hated how much she sounded like she needed his approval. "I think you just saved my company," Adrian said quietly. Again, Clara stood in the empty conference room, her laptop still projecting the final slide onto the screen behind her, and felt the adrenaline drain from her body all at once. Her legs wobbled slightly. She gripped the edge of the table. "Hey," Adrian said, moving closer. "You okay?" "I will be. Just give me a second." He waited while she breathed through it, didn't try to fill the silence or tell her she'd done well. Just stood there, solid and present, until her hands stopped shaking. "Catherine's the hardest sell," Adrian said finally. "If you won her over, the others will follow." "Did I win her over?" "You told her about your father. That wasn't in the practice runs." Clara looked at him, trying to read his expression. "Was that wrong? Too personal?" "No, it was honest." Adrian picked up her laptop, closed it, handed it to her. "Honesty is what they needed to hear. Robert gave them confidence. You gave them truth." Patricia appeared in the doorway, looking slightly breathless. "Mr. Vale, Catherine's on the phone. She wants to speak with you privately." Adrian's expression didn't change, but Clara saw his jaw tighten slightly. "I'll take it in my office." He glanced back at Clara. "Go home. Get some actual rest. I'll call you when I know something." Clara wanted to argue, wanted to stay and pace the hallways and wait for news, but exhaustion was creeping into her bones again. She nodded and gathered her things. The subway ride home felt surreal. Around her, people lived their ordinary lives, students with headphones, workers heading to night shifts, a woman arguing with someone on her phone. Clara sat with her laptop bag on her knees and thought about the fact that in some conference room somewhere, people were deciding the future of work she'd created. Work that had consumed her for 3 weeks, that had pulled her back into a life she'd thought was gone forever. Her apartment felt emptier than usual. Clara set down her bag, kicked off the shoes that had been slowly killing her feet all day, and stood in the middle of her living room unsure what to do with herself. For 3 weeks, every moment had been scheduled, purposeful, urgent. Now she had nothing but time to wait. She pulled out her phone to order takeout and saw a text from Priya sent 10 minutes ago. "Teams at Murphy's Bar celebrating. You should come." Clara looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. Suit rumpled from a day of stress sweating, hair falling out of the bun she'd carefully pinned that morning, dark circles under her eyes, that makeup hadn't quite covered. She looked exhausted and wired and nothing like someone ready to socialize. She went anyway. Murphy's was 3 blocks from Vale Tower, a dive bar that somehow survived among the upscale restaurants and corporate wine lounges. Clara found her team crowded around 2 tables they'd pushed together, already several rounds in judging by the noise level. David saw her first and let out a cheer that made everyone turn. "She's here! The woman who just made us all look good!" Priya stood and pulled Clara into a hug that smelled like beer and relief. "You were incredible. I knew you would be, but still. Incredible." Someone pressed a beer into Clara's hand. She took a long drink and felt some of the tension in her shoulders ease. Michelle was explaining to James how Clara had handled Catherine's question about error prevention, her hands gesturing wildly. David was showing everyone a meme he'd made about battery safety that was actually pretty funny. "Speech!" someone called out. "No," Clara said immediately. "Speech! Speech!" Clara looked around at their faces, these people who'd trusted her when they had no reason to, who'd worked themselves to exhaustion because she'd asked them to, who'd built something remarkable together. She set down her beer and stood. "I'm not good at speeches," she started, and someone laughed. 3 weeks ago, I was serving water to people who didn't see me. I thought my life in chemistry was over. I thought I'd lost my chance." She had to pause, emotion catching in her throat. "You all gave me a second chance, not just at a career, but at remembering who I used to be, who I still am." She raised her beer. "Whatever happens with the investors, I want you to know, working with you has been the best 3 weeks of my life." They drank to that, and then the moment got too heavy, and someone started telling an embarrassing story about a lab mishap from the previous week, and the conversation spun away into easier territory. Clara ended up at the bar next to Priya, both of them nursing their second beers and watching the team laugh together. "Can I ask you something?" Priya said. "And you can tell me it's none of my business." "Go ahead. What happened the night you met Adrian? I've heard the official version, but I want to hear it from you." Clara traced the condensation on her beer bottle, remembering. "I saw something wrong, and I couldn't stay quiet. That's all." "That's not all. You risked your job. You embarrassed a room full of executives. You made yourself visible when you'd spent years trying to disappear." Priya turned to face her. "That takes guts. Or stupidity. Maybe both." Priya smiled. "But it worked out, didn't it?" "Had it?" Clara thought about the presentation, about Catherine's skeptical face, about Adrian's words, "I trust you," that felt like more weight than she knew how to carry. "Ask me again after the investors decide," Clara said. Her phone rang at 10:30. Adrian's name on the screen. Clara's heart jumped into her throat. She stepped outside into the cool night air to take the call, suddenly grateful for the beer that had dulled her nerves slightly. "Clara." "Hi, I'm at Murphy's with the team. Sorry, it's loud. Let me—" "They signed." Clara stopped walking. "What?" "The investors. They signed the deal. Full partnership, manufacturing rights, everything. We start production in 6 months." The words didn't process at first. Clara stood on the sidewalk outside a dive bar, phone pressed to her ear, and tried to make her brain catch up with what he'd just said. "They signed," she repeated stupidly. "Catherine said your presentation was the most honest assessment of risk she'd seen in 20 years. She said if you're willing to put your name on the technology, she's willing to put her money behind it." Adrian's voice carried something Clara hadn't heard before, exhaustion mixed with relief. "We did it. You did it." Clara sat down on the curb because her legs had stopped working. "Oh my God. Yeah. We're really doing this. We're really building these batteries. 50,000 units in the first production run. If they perform as expected, we'll scale to 500,000 within 2 years." Adrian paused. "Clara, this is going to change everything. Electric vehicles with triple the range of current models. Energy storage for renewable grids. This is what I've been working toward for a decade." The weight of it hit her all at once. 50,000 batteries. 50,000 chances for her formula to fail or succeed. 50,000 families trusting their lives to chemistry she'd written on a napkin in a moment of desperate courage. "What if something goes wrong?" Clara asked quietly. "What if we missed something? Then we fix it, but we won't have missed anything, not with you checking the work." Adrian's voice softened. "Go celebrate with your team. You've earned it. We'll talk logistics Monday." After he hung up, Clara sat on the curb for another minute, watching cars pass, letting the news settle. Then she went back inside, where Priya took one look at her face and knew. They signed, Clara said. The bar erupted. Someone bought a round of shots. David tried to lift Clara onto his shoulders and nearly dropped her. Michelle cried happy tears and blamed it on the alcohol. Priya hugged her so hard Clara's ribs protested. Clara let herself get swept up in it, the celebration and relief and pure joy of people who'd worked themselves raw and succeeded. She drank too much and laughed too loud and felt, for the first time in 5 years, like she was exactly where she belonged. She woke up Saturday morning with a headache and a text from Adrian sent at 6 a.m. Monday, 9 a.m., my office. Bring coffee. Clara groaned and pulled a pillow over her face. But she was smiling. Monday arrived with the harsh clarity of consequence. The deal was signed, which meant now they actually had to deliver. Clara sat across from Adrian in his office, both of them working through terrible coffee from the break room because they'd been too focused to remember proper espresso, and mapped out the next 6 months. Production timeline, Adrian said, pulling up a document on his screen. We need final specifications locked down by end of next week. Manufacturing setup takes 3 months. Testing protocols for each production batch. Will take at least 2 weeks per batch, Clara interrupted. We can't rush the safety testing. The investors want first deliveries in 5 months. Then the investors need to adjust their expectations. Adrian, we can't compress safety protocols because of artificial deadlines. Adrian leaned back in his chair, studying her. You're going to push back on me a lot, aren't you? Every single time it matters. Something that might have been approval crossed his face. Good. That's what I need. He made a note on his tablet. 6 months for first deliveries. I'll handle the investors. They worked through lunch, ordering sandwiches neither of them ate, debating supply chain logistics and quality control measures. Patricia interrupted twice with urgent calls Adrian had to take, and both times Clara used the break to check in with her team via text. Priya reported that cathode production was on schedule. James had identified a potential optimization in the thermal management that could improve efficiency by 3%. Around 3, Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression shifted into something softer. I need to leave by 4, he said. School pickup. Clara had forgotten about Ethan. How old is he again? 6? Just turned 7 last month, first grade. Adrian pulled up a photo on his phone and turned it toward Clara. Ethan grinning at the camera, missing a front tooth, holding up a drawing of what looked like a T-Rex. He's been asking about the battery lady. He has? Apparently dinosaurs and batteries are equally fascinating. Adrian set down his phone. He doesn't talk about new people usually. He's been cautious since his mother died. Doesn't trust easily. Clara thought about the small boy who'd announced that Triceratops had 3 horns for protection, who'd looked at her with open curiosity instead of the wariness grief often built in children. He seems like a good kid, she said. He is. Smart as hell. Sensitive. Too serious for 7. Adrian's voice carried a weight Clara recognized. The specific exhaustion of single parenthood combined with grief. Some days I look at him and see Emma. Same expressions, same way of thinking. It's hard. It was the most personal thing Adrian had shared with her, and Clara wasn't sure what to do with it. They'd built a professional relationship on mutual respect and shared purpose. This felt different, more vulnerable. My father used to say that the people we lose live on in the things they taught us, Clara said quietly. Maybe Ethan carrying pieces of his mother isn't something to survive. Maybe it's something to honor. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. She would have liked you, Emma. She didn't tolerate bullshit either. Clara felt something shift in her chest, some small wall coming down. I wish I could have met her. Yeah, me too. At 4, Adrian packed up his briefcase and headed for the door. He paused at the threshold. Clara, I want you to know you're doing exceptional work. Not just the chemistry, the leadership, the integrity, all of it. Thank you, Clara managed, and the words felt inadequate for the warmth spreading through her. After he left, Clara sat alone in his enormous office and thought about how strange life was. A month ago, she'd been invisible. Now she was having personal conversations with a billionaire about grief and fatherhood and the people who shaped us. The months that followed were brutal in the best possible way. Clara threw herself into production setup with the same intensity she'd brought to the prototype development. She traveled to manufacturing facilities, reviewed equipment specifications, trained quality control teams. She gave presentations to industry groups and defended her methodology to skeptical engineers and slowly, gradually, built a reputation as someone who knew what she was talking about. The debt collectors stopped calling because she'd paid them off. All of it. $347,000 gone in 4 months. Clara had written the final check with hands that shook. Not from fear this time, but from the sheer impossible reality of being free. She moved to a new apartment with windows that closed properly and a kitchen that didn't smell like other people's cooking. Nothing fancy, but clean and hers and paid for without panic. Priya became not just a colleague, but a friend. They got dinner once a week, usually somewhere cheap because Priya was putting her sister through college and money was tight. Clara picked up the tab more often than not, remembering what it felt like to count every dollar. The team grew. Clara hired 3 more researchers, including a brilliant recent PhD named Sarah, who reminded Clara of herself at that age, hungry to prove herself, terrified of failing. Clara mentored her the way she wished someone had mentored her, with honesty and support in equal measure. Adrian remained a constant presence, demanding, exacting, but fair. He pushed Clara hard, questioned her decisions, forced her to defend her reasoning. But he also backed her completely when she said something wasn't ready, even when it meant disappointing investors or extending timelines. They fell into an easy working rhythm. Morning meetings to align priorities, quick check-ins throughout the day, late afternoon debriefs where they'd argue about strategy over coffee that got progressively worse as the day wore on. Clara learned to read his moods, the way he ran his hand through his hair when he was frustrated, the slight tightening around his eyes when he was worried but trying not to show it, the rare, genuine smile when something went better than expected. She learned about Ethan in pieces. His obsession with dinosaurs had evolved into an obsession with space. He was struggling with math but excelling at reading. He'd started asking questions about his mother that Adrian didn't always know how to answer. He asked me yesterday if she'd be proud of him, Adrian said one evening, both of them working late on production quality reviews. The office was quiet, everyone else long gone. I told him yes, absolutely. But the truth is, I don't know. I don't know what Emma would think about the man I've become, the father I'm trying to be. Clara looked up from her laptop. Adrian was staring out the window at the city lights, his reflection ghostly in the glass. She married you, Clara said. That means she saw something worth believing in. She married a different version of me, someone who had time for things other than work, someone who didn't carry this much. He stopped, seeming to catch himself. Sorry, you didn't sign up to be my therapist. I signed up to work with you. That includes the occasionally human moments. Adrian turned from the window, and something in his expression made Clara's breath catch. It was the way he was looking at her, not like an employee or even a friend, but something else, something that made the air in the room feel different. Then his phone rang, breaking the moment. Patricia, even at 8 p.m., with some crisis that needed immediate attention. Adrian took the call, and the vulnerability disappeared back behind the CEO mask. Clara told herself she'd imagined it. They were colleagues. He was her boss. The power dynamic alone made anything else inappropriate, never mind the complexity of his grief and her gratitude for the opportunity he'd given her. But she thought about that look sometimes, late at night in her new apartment, and wondered. Production of the first battery batch started in month 5. Clara spent 2 weeks at the manufacturing facility, watching every step of the process, catching small variations that could compound into problems. The facility manager, a gruff man named Tom who'd been building batteries for 30 years, initially resented her oversight. By the end of the first week, he was asking her opinion on everything. You know your stuff, he told her bluntly. Most of the engineers they send me know theory, but not practice. You know both. I've made enough mistakes to learn the difference, Clara said. The first completed battery pack came off the line on a Tuesday. Clara held it in her hands. 48 cells perfectly integrated, encased in protective housing, every connection tested and verified, and felt emotion well up in her throat. We did it, Priya said beside her, and her voice was thick too. They ran the completed pack through every test in their arsenal. Thermal stress, rapid charging, impact resistance, sustained discharge. Every test it passed made Clara's chest feel lighter and her anxiety spike higher. Because passing tests meant they were getting closer to putting these batteries in actual vehicles, in cars that families would drive, in buses that would carry children. The responsibility of it was crushing and exhilarating. Adrian flew out to the facility for the final validation test. He stood with Clara in the observation room, both of them watching monitors as the battery pack underwent its most extreme stress test yet, the equivalent of 10 years of heavy use compressed into 72 hours. Hour 68, and Clara hadn't slept in 2 days. She stood with a coffee cup that had gone cold hours ago, eyes burning from staring at data streams, and watched the numbers hold steady. "When's the last time you rested?" Adrian asked quietly. "I'll rest when we're done." "Clara, I'm fine." "You're exhausted." "So are you. I see you checking your phone every 10 minutes to make sure Ethan's okay with the nanny." Adrian's jaw tightened. "That's different." "How?" "Because he's my son. He's my responsibility. And this is mine." Clara gestured at the monitors. "These batteries, the people who'll depend on them, that's my responsibility. I don't get to sleep until I'm sure." Adrian studied her face for a long moment. "You know you can't personally guarantee every battery that comes off that line." "I can try. That's not sustainable." "Maybe not, but it's necessary." At hour 71, a small anomaly appeared in cell 14. Temperature elevated by 0.3 degrees Celsius. Clara's heart stopped. "Talk to me," she said to Tom, who was monitoring the systems. "Could be a sensor fluctuation, or it could be the beginning of degradation." Tom pulled up detailed thermal imaging. "See that? Heat distribution is still even. If it was real degradation, we'd see asymmetry." Clara stared at the imaging, her tired brain trying to process what she was seeing. Adrian moved closer, looking over her shoulder at the screen. "Sensor error?" he asked. "Probably, but we can't be sure without completing the test," Adrian finished. "So we wait." They waited. The temperature held at the elevated level for 20 minutes, then slowly dropped back to baseline. Cell 14 performed normally for the remainder of the test. When the 72-hour mark hit and every indicator showed green, Clara finally let herself breathe. "Successful test completion," Tom announced. "Battery pack performs within all specified parameters. She's good to go." Clara sat down hard in the nearest chair, and suddenly she was crying. Just tears running down her face without sound, the release of months of pressure all at once. Adrian crouched next to her chair, and she felt his hand on her shoulder. "Hey, you did it. It's okay." "I was so scared it would fail," Clara whispered. "I know, but it didn't. Your work held up." Clara wiped her face with the back of her hand, embarrassed. "Sorry, I'm just tired." "You're human. It's allowed." Adrian stood and extended his hand to help her up. "Come on, I'm buying you dinner and then you're sleeping for 12 hours minimum." "I should review the data. Tom's team can handle the data review. You're done for today." They ended up at a diner 3 blocks from the hotel where they were both staying. Nothing fancy, just burgers and fries and coffee that was only marginally better than break room quality. Clara was too exhausted to care. She ate mechanically, her brain starting to shut down now that the adrenaline had faded. "Can I ask you something?" Adrian said, pushing his half-eaten burger aside. "Sure." "Do you ever regret it, leaving your doctorate program?" Clara thought about it honestly. "Every day for the first 2 years. My father kept apologizing, like his cancer was his fault, like I'd sacrificed my dreams for him." She took a sip of coffee. "But I'd do it again. He needed me. That mattered more than any degree." "He died knowing you loved him." "Yeah, he did." Clara met Adrian's eyes across the table. "Is that why you work so hard? So Ethan knows you're building something for him?" "Partly. Also because if I stop moving, I have to think about everything I lost. Work is easier than grief." The honesty in his voice made Clara's chest ache. "Emma would want you to be happy, not just successful." "How do you know what Emma would want?" "Because she loved you enough to have a child with you. That means she wanted your happiness, not just your achievement." Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing patterns in the condensation on his water glass. "Some days I can barely remember what happiness felt like. It's been 3 years and I still wake up reaching for her side of the bed." Clara didn't have words for that kind of loss, so she just reached across the table and squeezed his hand. They sat like that for a minute, Connected across cheap formica in a diner that smelled like grease and coffee, two people who'd saved each other in different ways, learning what it meant to be seen. Then Adrian's phone buzzed. The nanny, reporting that Ethan had finished his homework and was asking if Daddy would be home to say goodnight. The moment broke, and they were colleagues again, professional distance reasserting itself. "I should take this," Adrian said, pulling his hand back. "Of course." Clara watched him step outside to talk to his son, saw the way his expression softened even through the diner window, and felt something she didn't want to name settling in her chest. She was falling for her boss, slowly, carefully, against every ounce of professional judgment she possessed, and she had absolutely no idea what to do about it. The flight back home was quiet. Adrian worked on his laptop while Clara pretended to read a book and actually just stared at the same page for an hour. When they landed, he offered her a ride home in his car, and she accepted even though the subway would have been faster. Thomas drove them through the city while Adrian took calls and Clara watched buildings slide past. When they reached her apartment, Adrian ended his call and turned to face her. "Clara, thank you for everything you've done these past months. I know I don't say it enough. You say it plenty." "No, I don't. I push you hard because you can handle it. But I should acknowledge more often that what you've built, the team, the processes, the culture of excellence, it's exceptional." Clara felt heat rise in her face. "I had good support. You had nothing but obstacles and you turned them into opportunities." Adrian's gaze held hers. "You're remarkable. I hope you know that." The words hung between them, weighted with something more than professional appreciation. Clara's heart hammered in her chest. "I should go," she said, reaching for the door handle. "Clara." She paused, looking back. Adrian seemed to struggle with something, then shook his head. "Get some rest. I'll see you Monday." Clara nodded and escaped into her building, her heart still racing, Adrian's words echoing in her head. Remarkable. Like he saw not just her work, but her, all of her. The broken pieces she'd glued back together, and the sharp edges she'd never quite smoothed out, and the fierce determination that had carried her through the worst years of her life. She climbed the stairs to her apartment and thought about the fact that somewhere in the last 6 months, Adrian Vale had become more than just her boss. He'd become the person she thought about first thing in the morning and last thing at night. The person whose approval mattered more than it should. The person whose grief she wanted to ease, and whose son she wanted to protect, and whose rare smiles felt like victories. This was dangerous territory, inappropriate territory. But sitting in her apartment that night, Clara admitted the truth to herself. She was already in too deep to find her way back out. The first commercial batteries shipped on a Wednesday morning in October, exactly 7 months after Clara had written a formula on a napkin and changed the trajectory of her entire life. She stood in the warehouse watching forklifts load pallets onto trucks, each pallet holding battery packs that would power electric vehicles across 3 continents. Priya stood beside her, both of them wearing the safety vests required in the shipping area, both of them trying not to look as emotional as they felt. "This is weird, right?" Priya said. "Watching our work just leave? Very weird." Clara checked her tablet for the 3rd time, verifying shipping manifests she'd already verified twice. "What if we missed something? What if there's a flaw we didn't catch and 6 months from now?" "Stop!" Priya put a hand on Clara's arm. "We tested everything, multiple times. You personally reviewed every quality control report. These batteries are safe." "But what if Clara, breathe. You can't control everything." Clara knew Priya was right. The work was done. The batteries were built to specification, tested beyond industry standards, certified by 3 independent safety organizations. She'd done everything humanly possible to ensure they were safe. So why did watching them leave feel like sending children off to war? Her phone buzzed. "Adrian, press conference at 2. Don't be late. And wear something that photographs well." Clara looked down at her jeans and safety vest. Right. The press conference, where she'd stand in front of cameras and industry journalists and announce that Vale Energy was officially launching the most advanced battery technology on the market, where she'd put her face and name on work that could change the world or destroy it, depending on whether she'd gotten the chemistry right. No pressure. No. She got back to the office at noon and stared at her closet, the one she'd slowly filled with professional clothes that still felt like costumes. She settled on a black pantsuit that Priya had helped her pick out, paired with a blue shirt that didn't wash out her complexion under harsh lighting. Professional, but not intimidating. Confident, but approachable. She looked like someone who knew what she was doing. She hoped that would be enough. The press conference was held in Vail Tower's ground floor auditorium, a space that could seat 200 people and was currently packed with journalists, industry analysts, and representatives from every major automotive manufacturer. Clara stood backstage with Adrian, both of them watching the crowd through a gap in the curtains. "You ready?" Adrian asked. "Absolutely not." "Good. Means you'll be sharp." He adjusted his tie, a nervous gesture Clara had learned to recognize. He was anxious too, just better at hiding it. "I'll do the business overview, you handle the technical presentation, then we'll take questions together." "What if they ask something I don't know?" "Then you say you don't know. Honesty over bullshit, remember?" Patricia appeared with a headset, counting down. 3 minutes, Mr. Vale." Adrian turned to Clara, and for a moment the CEO mask slipped. She saw the same fear she felt reflected in his eyes, the weight of knowing that hundreds of millions of dollars and thousands of jobs and the future of sustainable energy all hinged on the next hour going well. "We've got this," he said quietly, and Clara wasn't sure if he was reassuring her or himself. "Yeah, we do." They walked onto the stage together. Camera flashes erupted. Clara took her position at the podium, gripping its edges to keep her hands from shaking, and looked out at a sea of faces waiting to judge her. Adrian spoke first, outlining the business case, the market opportunity, the partnerships Vale Energy had secured. He was polished and confident, every word measured. When he introduced Clara, he did it simply. Dr. Clara Hayes, Director of Battery Research and Development, the brilliant mind behind our breakthrough technology. Clara stepped up to the microphone and her mind went blank. 200 people stared at her. Cameras recorded every second. Somewhere out there, this was being live-streamed to thousands more. And Clara couldn't remember her opening line. Then she saw Priya in the third row, giving her a thumbs up. And next to Priya, Michelle and James and David and Sarah, her whole team, all of them grinning like idiots, radiating support. Clara took a breath and found her voice. 7 months ago, I was serving water at a restaurant dinner where a deal was being finalized based on dangerous technology. I saw a formula that would have failed catastrophically, and I had a choice: stay silent and keep my job, or speak up and risk everything. She paused, letting that sink in. I spoke up, and the man I interrupted, the CEO of this company, did something remarkable. He listened. She saw Adrian shift slightly at the edge of the stage, surprised she was starting with this. Since then, my team and I have built a battery system that doesn't just meet industry safety standards. It exceeds them. Because we're not interested in doing what's profitable or convenient. We're interested in doing what's right. Clara pulled up her first slide, a molecular diagram of the cathode structure. "Let me show you how we did it." For the next 20 minutes, Clara walked them through the science. Not dumbed down, not oversimplified, but the actual chemistry and language that both technical experts and educated laypeople could follow. She showed test results, safety data, performance metrics. She was honest about challenges they'd faced and how they'd solved them. When she finished, the room was silent for a beat. Then someone started clapping, and it spread until the entire auditorium was applauding. Clara's face heated, and she stepped back from the podium, overwhelmed. Adrian moved forward for the Q&A session, fielding questions about market strategy and production timelines. Then a journalist from a major tech publication raised her hand. "Question for Dr. Hayes. You mentioned risking your job by speaking up. Can you talk more about that decision? What made you think it was worth it?" Clara moved back to the microphone. "My father died from a medical error. Someone made a mistake and didn't catch it, and he paid the price. I knew if I stayed quiet and that battery formula went into production, someone else's father would die. Someone's mother, someone's child. I couldn't live with that." The journalist scribbled notes. "So this was personal for you?" "All good science should be personal. It should matter enough that you're willing to fight for it." Clara glanced at Adrian, then back at the crowd. "That night, I was invisible. I was just the help. But I had knowledge that could save lives. And staying invisible would have made me complicit in what came next. Sometimes being seen is scary, but it's necessary." Another hand went up. "Do you worry about the pressure? The responsibility of knowing millions of people will depend on technology you designed." "Every single day," Clara said honestly, "but that fear keeps me careful. It keeps me questioning everything, testing everything, never assuming I've got it right just because the data looks good. Fear isn't the enemy, complacency is. The questions continued for another 30 minutes. Adrian handled the business side, Clara handled the technical side, and together they presented a unified vision of what Vale Energy was building. When it finally ended and they walked off stage, Clara's legs felt shaky. "You were incredible," Adrian said as soon as they were backstage. "That opening, starting with the restaurant story, that was brilliant. I panicked and couldn't remember my prepared remarks." "Well, panic looks good on you." Patricia appeared with her tablet. "Mr. Vale, the live stream hit 500,000 viewers. Social media response is overwhelmingly positive. 3 automotive executives want to schedule calls, and someone from the Department of Energy wants to discuss a potential partnership." Adrian nodded, processing. "Set up the calls for tomorrow. And Patricia, clear my schedule for the rest of today." Patricia's eyebrows rose slightly, but she didn't question it. "Done." After she left, Adrian turned to Clara. "Come on, we're celebrating. I need to check in with the team. The team is already celebrating without us. Priya texted me. They're at Murphy's." Adrian pulled out his phone and sent a quick text. "I told her we'd meet them there in an hour, but first, there's something I need to show you." Clara followed him, confused, as he led her not toward the exit but toward the elevator. They rode up to the executive floor in silence, the adrenaline from the press conference slowly fading into exhaustion. When the doors opened, Adrian headed not to his office, but to the small private dining room occasionally used for intimate business dinners. He opened the door and gestured for Clara to enter. The room had been transformed. Candles on the table, soft lighting, and on the wall opposite the window, framed and mounted like a piece of art, was a napkin. The napkin. The one Clara had written the corrected formula on 7 months ago, slightly yellowed now, her handwriting visible in black ink. Clara stopped breathing. "I had it preserved," Adrian said quietly, coming to stand beside her. "That napkin saved my company. It saved lives. It deserves to be remembered." Clara stared at her own handwriting, at the formula that had pulled her back from invisibility, and felt tears burning behind her eyes. "You kept it." "Of course I kept it. It's the moment everything changed." Adrian was looking at her now, not at the napkin. "Clara, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting." Her heart started hammering. "Okay. When you walked into that dining room 7 months ago, you were just a waitress I didn't notice. When you corrected my formula, you became someone who'd saved my company. But somewhere between then and now, you became something else." He paused, and Clara saw his jaw tighten the way it did when he was forcing himself to be vulnerable. "You became someone I can't stop thinking about. Someone who makes me want to be better than I am. Someone who makes me remember what it felt like to be happy before grief hollowed me out." Clara's breath caught. "Adrian, let me finish. I know this is inappropriate. I know there's a power dynamic that makes this complicated. I know you might not feel the same way, but I can't keep pretending I only see you as an employee when the truth is I see you as—" He stopped, struggling with words. "As someone essential. To my work, yes, but also to my life." Clara looked at him, at the vulnerability written across his face, at the fear that she might reject him, and felt something settle into place in her chest. "That night in the diner," she said quietly, "when you told me about Emma and I held your hand, I knew then." "Knew what? That I was in trouble. That I was starting to care about you in ways I shouldn't. That every time you smiled at something I'd done, it felt like winning." Clara stepped closer to him. "I told myself it was just gratitude. You'd given me my life back, but it wasn't gratitude that made me want to ease your grief. It wasn't gratitude that made me care about Ethan like he was mine to protect too." Adrian's eyes were locked on hers, dark and intense. "What was it?" "This." Clara reached up and touched his face, her palm against his jaw. "Caring about you. Maybe even—" He kissed her before she could finish the sentence. It wasn't smooth or perfect. Their noses bumped slightly, and Clara made an undignified sound of surprise before her brain caught up with what was happening. Then she kissed him back, her hands sliding into his hair, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her closer. He tasted like coffee and possibility, and Clara felt 7 months of careful professional distance collapse into this moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that for months, he admitted. You could have done it sooner. You're my employee. The power dynamic. I'm a grown woman who can make her own choices. Claire pulled back enough to meet his eyes. But we need to be smart about this. HR policies, professional boundaries, making sure the team doesn't think I got my position because of anything other than merit. Agreed. We'll be careful. Discreet. Adrian's thumb traced her jawline. But Clara, I need you to know you earned everything you have. Your position, your team's respect, your success. That has nothing to do with how I feel about you, and everything to do with how brilliant you are. I know, but other people might not see it that way. Then we'll make sure they do. Adrian stepped back, putting professional distance between them again, and Clara saw him rebuilding the CEO composure. We should get to Murphy's. The team will wonder where we are. They took separate cars to the bar, maintaining appearances. But when Clara walked in and saw her team celebrating, saw Priya wave her over with a beer already poured, she caught Adrian's eye across the room and felt the secret between them like a live wire. The celebration went late. People bought rounds and told embarrassing stories and toasted Clara so many times she lost count. Around midnight, she found herself outside getting air and Adrian appeared beside her. You okay? He asked, careful to maintain distance in case anyone came out. Yeah, just overwhelmed. Good overwhelmed, but still. Today was a big day. You handled it perfectly. Clara leaned against the brick wall, looking up at the city sky where no stars were visible through light pollution. A year ago, I was drowning in debt and grief, and the absolute certainty that I'd lost my one chance at doing something that mattered. Now I'm standing here having just launched technology that might actually change the world. It's surreal. You created your own second chance. I just gave you the opportunity. You gave me more than that. You gave me permission to be the person I was before life knocked me down. Clara looked at him. I don't think you understand what that meant. What it still means. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Emma used to say that people aren't just one thing. We're all multiple versions of ourselves, and sometimes circumstances force us into versions that don't fit. She said the lucky ones get to become who they're meant to be. His voice was soft. You're becoming who you were meant to be, Clara, and I get to watch it happen. That's a gift. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She sounds like she was wise. She was, about everything except choosing safe drivers. The bitterness in his voice was reflexive, old grief asserting itself. Sorry, that's not fair to her memory. Grief isn't fair, it just is. Clara reached out and squeezed his hand quickly before letting go. But you're allowed to be angry about what you lost. Emma would understand that. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the muffled sounds of celebration from inside the bar. Finally, Adrian checked his watch. I should get home. The nanny charges double after midnight. How's Ethan doing? Good. He's in a phase where he wants to know how everything works. Last week, he disassembled his alarm clock to see the gears. The week before that, he tried to build a rocket from paper towel tubes. Adrian's expression softened the way it always did when talking about his son. He asked about you yesterday, wanted to know if the battery lady could teach him about chemistry. Clara's heart did something complicated in her chest. I'd like that, if you think it's appropriate. I think, Adrian paused, choosing words carefully. I think Ethan's been waiting for me to be happy again, and you make me happy. So, yes, I think it's appropriate, but we go slow, for his sake. Slow is good. I'm not going anywhere. Adrian's smile was rare and genuine. No, you're not. The weeks that followed found a rhythm. Publicly, Clara and Adrian maintained strict professionalism. In private, they stole moments, late-night calls after Ethan was asleep, weekend coffee at places far enough from the office that they wouldn't be recognized, careful text messages that could be explained away as work-related if anyone saw them. Clara met Ethan officially a month after the press conference. Adrian invited her to Saturday morning breakfast at their home, a brownstone in a quiet neighborhood that somehow managed to be both impressive and comfortable. Ethan greeted her at the door wearing pajamas with planets on them. You're really tall, he announced, looking up at her. You're really observant, Clara replied seriously. Dad says you're the smartest person he knows. Clara glanced at Adrian, who was watching from the kitchen doorway with barely suppressed amusement. Your dad is biased. What's biased? It means he likes me, so he thinks I'm smarter than I actually am. Ethan considered this. Are you smart enough to help with my science homework? Probably. What's the assignment? I have to explain photosynthesis, but make it interesting. Ethan rolled his eyes. Mrs. Patterson says my last presentation was too boring. Clara spent the next hour helping Ethan build a presentation comparing photosynthesis to a battery, both storing energy for later use, both converting one form of power into another. Adrian watched them work together, occasionally contributing ideas, and Clara felt something shift. This wasn't just about her and Adrian anymore. This was about whether she could fit into their life, into the carefully constructed world Adrian had built for his son after Emma died. When Ethan's presentation was finished, complete with hand-drawn diagrams and a working model made from household items, he looked up at Clara with Emma's eyes and Adrian's intelligence. Can you come back next week? He asked. I have a project on space. Clara looked at Adrian, checking for permission. He nodded slightly. I'd love to, Clara said. It became a routine. Saturday mornings at Adrian's house, helping Ethan with homework or building science experiments or just playing board games while Adrian made breakfast. Clara learned that Ethan liked his eggs scrambled with cheese, that he was terrified of thunderstorms, but too proud to admit it, that he still slept with a stuffed elephant his mother had given him and refused to let anyone wash it. She learned that Adrian sang off-key while cooking, that he was hopeless at board games but played anyway because it made Ethan happy, that he kept photos of Emma throughout the house, not as shrines, but as natural parts of their life. Emma in the kitchen, laughing. Emma holding newborn Ethan. Emma and Adrian on their wedding day, both of them looking impossibly young. Does it bother you? Adrian asked one Saturday after Ethan had gone to play in his room. The photos. Clara looked at the one nearest them. Emma and Ethan at what looked like a beach, both sandy and grinning. No, she was part of your life. She's part of who Ethan is. Why would I want to erase that? Some people would find it weird, the new girlfriend surrounded by the dead wife. I'm not some people. Clara met his eyes. And I'm not trying to replace her. I'm just trying to fit into the life you've built. Adrian pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. You fit perfectly. But fitting perfectly didn't mean it was easy. There were nights when Adrian woke from nightmares about the accident and couldn't explain what he dreamed. Times when Ethan would cry for his mother, and Clara could only hold him while feeling utterly inadequate. Moments when the weight of stepping into a dead woman's shoes felt crushing. There were also work complications. Rumors started circulating about Clara and Adrian's relationship despite their discretion. Nothing confirmed, but office gossip had a way of finding truth. Priya confronted Clara about it one evening in the lab. Are you and Adrian together? She asked bluntly. Clara thought about lying, but Priya deserved better. Yes. How long? Officially? 2 months. But it's been building for longer. Priya was quiet for a moment, processing. Do people know? We've been careful, but clearly not careful enough. Clara, I'm not judging, but you need to be aware. If this gets out, people are going to assume your success is because of the relationship, not your work. I know. We've talked about it. We're trying to... There's no trying. Either you keep it completely secret or you go public and deal with the fallout. This middle ground is dangerous. Priya's expression was concerned, not angry. You're brilliant. You've earned everything you have. Don't let anyone take that from you. Clara told Adrian about the conversation that night over the phone. Priya's right, he said. We need to make a decision. Either we hide this completely, no more Saturday mornings together, no more stolen moments, or we go public and accept whatever comes. Clara thought about Saturday mornings with Ethan, about the way Adrian's face softened when he looked at her, about the life they were building in careful increments. Then she thought about what she'd told that journalist at the press conference. Sometimes being seen is scary, but it's necessary. I don't want to hide, she said. I'm tired of being invisible. Are you sure? This will be complicated. Nothing about us has been simple from the beginning. Why start now? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Okay, we'll tell HR first. Make sure everything is documented properly. Then we'll tell your team. Then we go public. They scheduled a meeting with Human Resources for the following Monday. Clara sat across from the HR director, a no-nonsense woman named Janet, and outlined the relationship's timeline. I need to be clear, Clara said. I was hired based on merit. The relationship developed after I'd already proven myself. There's no conflict of interest regarding my position. Janet made notes. Technically, Mr. Vale is your direct supervisor. That creates inherent conflict. So what are you suggesting? Adrian asked, his voice calm but with an edge Clara recognized. Dr. Hayes could report to someone else. The COO, perhaps. That would eliminate the direct reporting relationship while allowing you both to continue your work. Clara and Adrian exchanged glances. It made sense, even if it stung slightly. Fine, Clara said. I'll report to whoever removes the conflict. Janet nodded. I'll draft the paperwork. In the meantime, I need you both to understand. This will become public knowledge. There will be speculation about favoritism, about Dr. Hayes's qualifications, about the timing. You need to be prepared for that. They were as prepared as they could be. Clara called a team meeting and told them directly, Priya beside her for support. Most people seemed unsurprised. A few looked uncomfortable. Sarah, her young mentee, raised her hand. Does this change anything about how the team operates? She asked. Nothing, Clara said firmly. I earned my position through my work. I'll keep earning it the same way. Anyone who has concerns about favoritism or conflicts can bring them to me directly. The public announcement came a week later. A brief statement from Vale Energy confirming that the CEO and Director of Battery Research were in a relationship, that all appropriate HR protocols had been followed, and that both parties remained committed to the company's mission and values. The internet, predictably, lost its mind. Articles appeared analyzing Clara's credentials, questioning whether she was qualified, speculating about the timeline of the relationship. Some framed it as a romantic success story. Waitress saves Billionaire's company and wins his heart. Others were cruel, suggesting she'd slept her way to the top. Clara read the comments once, then never again. Adrian was less successful at ignoring them. They're calling you a gold digger, he said one night, furious, showing her his phone. I know. I don't care. How can you not care? Because I know the truth. You know the truth. The people whose opinions matter know the truth. Clara took the phone from him and set it aside. The rest is noise. But the noise got louder. A profile in a business magazine questioned her qualifications. A competitor implied in an interview that Vale Energy's technology might be less sound than claimed, given the dramatic circumstances of its development. Industry colleagues who'd congratulated Clara on her work suddenly seemed distant. The only thing that kept her grounded was the work itself. The batteries performed flawlessly in real-world testing. Vehicle manufacturers reported exceptional results. Energy storage facilities using their technology showed unprecedented efficiency. The science was sound, regardless of what gossip claimed. 6 months after going public with the relationship, Clara received an invitation to speak at the International Battery Conference in Geneva, the most prestigious event in her field. The invitation came with a note. We'd be honored to have you keynote on breakthrough technologies and safety innovations. Clara showed Adrian the invitation, and he grinned. They wouldn't invite you to keynote if they questioned your credentials. Or they're inviting me because the controversy makes good press. Does it matter? Either way, you're speaking to the top minds in battery technology. That's validation. Clara accepted the invitation. The conference was in November, almost exactly 1 year after she'd served water at the Gilded Compass and spotted a fatal flaw. Clara stood backstage at a venue in Geneva, wearing a navy dress Priya had helped her pick out, and thought about how much had changed. Adrian was in the audience with Ethan, who'd begged to come on this trip and see where his father and Clara worked. Patricia had arranged it all, booking them as a family, no longer hiding what they'd become to each other. The introduction was generous, listing Clara's credentials and accomplishments without once mentioning the drama. When she walked onto the stage, the applause was genuine. Clara looked out at the audience. Hundreds of the world's leading battery researchers, people whose work she'd studied, who'd shaped the field she loved, and felt the same panic she'd felt at the press conference. Then she saw Adrian and Ethan in the third row. Ethan was holding a sign he'd made himself. Battery Lady is the best. Clara smiled, and the fear evaporated. A year ago, I was invisible, she began, and the room went silent. I worked a job where people looked through me, where my knowledge and expertise were irrelevant because of the uniform I wore. Then I saw something dangerous, and I had to make a choice. Stay invisible and safe, or speak up and risk everything. She told them the whole story. Not the sanitized version from press releases, but the truth. The fear, the doubt, the crushing responsibility of knowing lives depended on her getting the chemistry right. She showed them her formula, walked them through the testing protocols, explained how she'd built a culture of questioning everything. Science isn't about being right the first time, Clara said. It's about being willing to be wrong, to test, to question, to admit when you don't know. The batteries we built work not because I'm some genius, but because I surrounded myself with brilliant people who weren't afraid to tell me when I was making mistakes. She talked about fear as a tool, about how being scared of failure could make you more careful rather than paralyzed. She talked about the responsibility they all carried as researchers, that their work had real-world consequences, that people's lives depended on them getting it right. When she finished, the applause lasted 2 full minutes. Researchers approached her afterward with questions, collaboration offers, genuine respect. No one asked about her relationship with Adrian. They only wanted to talk about the science. That night, in their hotel room after Ethan had fallen asleep in the adjoining room, Adrian pulled Clara close. "You were magnificent," he said. "Watching you up there, owning that stage. I've never been prouder. It felt good, like I'd finally proven myself." "You don't need to prove yourself, not to me, not to anyone." Clara rested her head on his shoulder. "I know, but it still felt good to do it anyway." They flew home the next day, and Clara returned to her lab with renewed energy. The team had made progress on a new battery variant while she was gone. Higher density, lower cost, equally safe. Sarah presented the initial findings with the confidence of someone who'd learned she could trust her own knowledge. "This is excellent work," Clara told her. "Run the thermal stress tests, and if it holds up, we'll move to prototype." Priya caught Clara in her office later. "So Geneva went well, better than expected." "Good, because we're getting a lot of interest from automotive manufacturers. Your keynote apparently convinced people that we're legitimate." Clara felt something settle in her chest. Legitimate. She'd earned that through work and integrity and refusing to hide either her relationship or her knowledge. The months blurred together after that. Production scaled up. New partnerships formed. The technology Clara had developed became industry standard. She won awards, gave talks, mentored young researchers. Her team grew to 25 people, then 40, then 60. 2 years after that night at the Gilded Compass, Clara stood in Adrian's office, the same office where he'd first offered her a job, and looked at the framed napkin on the wall. "Do you remember what you told me that first day?" she asked. Adrian came to stand beside her. "I told you lots of things. You said I was better than serving water. You are. You always were." "No." Clara turned to face him. "I wasn't. I was exactly where I needed to be to become who I am now. If I'd never lost my father, never gone into debt, never worked at that restaurant, I wouldn't have been there that night. I wouldn't have seen the formula. None of this would have happened." "So you're saying your suffering had purpose?" "I'm saying my suffering was real and terrible, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But it also shaped me, made me understand what matters, made me willing to risk everything because I knew what it cost to lose everything." Clara touched the glass, protecting the napkin. "That night, I saved your company. But you saved me first. You gave me a reason to be brave." Adrian pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "You were always brave. You just forgot for a while." There was a knock at the door. Patricia peeked in. "Sorry to interrupt, but Ethan's here. Something about a science project emergency." Ethan appeared behind Patricia, looking stressed in the way only a 9-year-old facing a school project could look. "Clara, I need help. Mr. Rodriguez assigned a presentation on renewable energy, and it's due Friday, and I don't know where to start." Clara and Adrian exchanged glances. Adrian nodded. "Come on," Clara said to Ethan. Let's go to my lab. I'll show you what renewable energy actually looks like." She led Ethan down to the research floor, where her team was running tests on the latest battery iteration. Ethan's eyes went wide, taking it all in. The equipment, the computers, the organized chaos of science in progress. "This is so cool," he breathed. "This is what your dad and I do," Clara said. "We try to make energy cleaner and safer so your generation inherits a better world." "Is that why you work so hard?" Clara crouched down to Ethan's eye level. "Partly, but also because I love it. The science, the discovery, the feeling when something you've worked on for months finally comes together." Your dad gave me a chance to do work I love, and I don't take that for granted. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then, my mom used to say that happy people make the world better. Dad told me that. Claire's throat tightened. Your mom sounds like she was very wise. She was. I don't remember her very well anymore, but Dad shows me pictures and tells me stories. Ethan looked up at Clara with eyes too old for his face. Is it okay that I'm glad you're here, even though it means Mom isn't? Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She pulled Ethan into a hug. It's absolutely okay. You can love your mom's memory and still be happy now. Those things don't cancel each other out. Dad's happier with you here. I'm happier too. They spent the next hour working on Ethan's project, and Clara realized this was what healing looked like. Not forgetting the past or pretending the pain hadn't been real, but making space for joy alongside the grief. Building new traditions while honoring old ones. Becoming a different version of yourself without erasing who you were. That night, after Ethan had gone home with Adrian, Clara stood alone in her lab looking at the batteries her team had built. Each one represented hundreds of hours of work, thousands of calculations, millions of dollars in investment. But more than that, they represented a choice she'd made 1 year ago to be brave when being quiet would have been easier. Her phone buzzed. Adrian, Ethan wants you to come to his presentation Friday. He says you're his technical consultant. Clara smiled and typed back. Tell him technical consultants charge high fees, at least 3 cookies. Adrian, he's already baking them. See you Friday? Clara, wouldn't miss it. She left the lab and walked out into the city night, past the building where she used to work in a uniform that made her invisible, past the subway station she'd ridden every day drowning in debt and grief, past all the markers of a life she'd once lived. That life felt like it belonged to someone else now. A different Clara, one who'd forgotten she was capable of brilliance, who'd let circumstance convince her she was ordinary. But Clara had never been ordinary. She'd just been buried under circumstances that were temporary, even when they felt permanent. And when the chance came to dig herself out, she'd taken it with both hands and refused to let go. 3 years after the night at the Gilded Compass, Vale Energy was the industry leader in battery technology. Clara's team had grown to over 100 researchers. The batteries they'd developed powered millions of vehicles and had prevented countless potential disasters through rigorous safety standards that became industry-wide requirements. Clara stood at a podium in Stockholm, accepting the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for her work on advanced battery safety and energy storage. The same award her doctoral advisor had once told her she might win someday, before life had derailed those dreams. In the audience sat Adrian and Ethan, now 11, both of them grinning like fools. Behind them, Priya and the core team who'd built everything alongside her. And scattered throughout the crowd, students and young researchers who'd told Clara she'd inspired them to speak up, to trust their knowledge, to refuse to be invisible. I was a waitress when I discovered the formula that began this work, Clara said into the microphone, her voice carrying to hundreds of people gathered to honor achievement. I was invisible, dismissed, assumed to be irrelevant. But knowledge doesn't care about the uniform you're wearing. Truth doesn't respect hierarchy. And sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to stay silent when you see something wrong. She talked about the importance of creating cultures where questioning was encouraged, where junior researchers could challenge senior ones, where safety mattered more than schedules. She thanked her team by name, crediting their work and their willingness to push back on her ideas when those ideas were flawed. Science is collaborative, Clara said. It's built on people willing to check each other's work, to admit mistakes, to value truth over ego. The battery technology we developed didn't come from one person having one insight. It came from a team of brilliant people committed to getting it right, no matter how long it took. When she finished and held the metal in her hands, heavy, real, proof that she'd made it back from the edge of despair to the pinnacle of her field, Clara thought about her father, about how he'd apologized for being sick, for derailing her career, never understanding that loving him through his illness had taught her what actually mattered. After the ceremony, Adrian found her in the crowd. Ethan was showing the medal to Priya, both of them arguing good-naturedly about whether Clara would let him take it to show and tell. How does it feel? Adrian asked, pulling her close. Surreal, like this is happening to someone else. It's happening to you, the woman who was brave enough to speak up when no one was listening. Clara looked at him. This man who'd lost everything and rebuilt himself, who'd taken a chance on a waitress with a formula written on a napkin, who'd shown her that second chances were real if you were willing to fight for them. "We did it," she said. "Actually did it." "You did it. I just gave you the opportunity." "No, we did it together. You gave me the chance, I did the work, and together we built something that mattered." Clara glanced over at Ethan, who was now wearing the medal around his neck and posing for photos. "And we're still building it." Adrian followed her gaze. "He wants to be a scientist. Because of you. Because of both of us. You showed him it was possible to love the work. I just showed him what the work looks like." They stood together watching Ethan make Priya laugh, surrounded by people who respected Clara's mind and valued her contributions, and Clara felt the final piece of healing click into place. She wasn't the broken woman drowning in debt anymore, but she wasn't trying to pretend that woman had never existed either. That woman's pain had forged this woman's strength. That woman's invisibility had taught this woman the value of being seen. Sometimes the worst moments of your life are preparing you for the best ones. Sometimes losing everything teaches you what truly matters. Sometimes being invisible makes you appreciate what it means to finally, fully, courageously be seen. Clara had been the waitress who saved a billionaire's company, but more importantly, she'd been the woman who saved herself, who took a moment of desperate courage and transformed it into a lifetime of meaningful work, who proved that your past doesn't determine your future, that circumstances can be overcome, that speaking truth to power is always worth the risk. Years later, when young researchers asked Clara for advice, she always told them the same thing: trust your knowledge, question everything, be willing to risk comfort for truth, and never ever let anyone convince you that you're invisible when you have something important to say. Because sometimes the person everyone overlooks is the one who sees what everyone else missed, and sometimes that changes everything.